Well, good afternoon, everyone. My computer tells me it's just turned 1400 hours, so hopefully people are coming back into the conference. I can see that there's already a significant number of participants who have arrived, and I guess one or two will do so as we get going. I'm going to just, for the people who perhaps have joined this afternoon, very quickly say we've had an excellent session this morning. I mean, you do have to have stamina to do these conferences online, don't you? But we started with a great keynote speech from Ian Duncan-Smith, and then two of our fantastic local authority leaders, Kevin Bentley and Guy Nicholson, spoke. And I won't go through the programme because people will have seen it, but very clearly what comes out of that is the importance of collaboration across parties, between political parties, between communities, in the interests of developing place and satisfying the needs of people as individual citizens and as employers. And that collaboration between central government, local government, the private sector, and that collaboration between geographies. There's a kind of map up on the screen now as I'm speaking, particularly the geographies that we occupy in the east of England and in the London wider southeast. Very important how we articulate with each other within that geography, how we support each other. We don't duplicate effort, but we get the most out of that. And of course, we're all particularly concerned about this area because the government has a levelling up agenda. I'm sure any reasonable person who cares about equality cares about that. I say that obviously in a non-political way, but you know, the Northern Powerhouse or the Midlands Engine are not the areas of the country that our efforts, our representation is focused on. London and the wider southeast and the east of England are the geography that you've got in front of you, and the innovation corridor's role in that is critical. And it is the link with London, which brings me to introduce this afternoon we've got two mayoral speeches, which is just fantastic, because a distinguishing feature of this corridor is that it is bookended, as we say, by two global cities, globally renowned for all sorts of reasons, but both are run by mayors. And London plays a really significant part in the distinction of this corridor, because it's the connections that Essex and Herts and Cambridge and Peterborough have with London that's really critical. So we have long worked not just with our individual boroughs in North London, that's the London Borough of Enfield, Waltham Forest and Haringey, and also with Hackney and others. We've also always worked with the combined authority, the Greater London Authority, the mayoral authority. So without further ado, let me hand over to Rajesh to give us a keynote for 15 minutes, and then I'll move into the session chaired by Daniel. Welcome, Rajesh. There's a little biography about you in the programme, so we're not going to waste time telling everybody how amazing you are. Although, as I know you, I can say you are amazing. In fact, all our speakers have been amazing and are doing terrific things in terms of their political leadership, whatever their party. So tell us about London, Rajesh, and the importance of this corridor to you. Over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anne, for that kind introduction. I remember hosting a roundtable on innovation with you in person in 2017. And here we are now, all on video call in very different times. Supporting innovation, productivity, growth, and levelling up across the UK are core priorities for the Mayor and I, and very close to my heart. I'm especially honoured to speak virtually in the home of one of the world's most dynamic science and technology innovation ecosystems. Last month, I was delighted to be reappointed as the Deputy Mayor of London for Business. I came from India to London nearly 20 years ago now, with just £200 and a pocket full of dreams and a head full of ideas. Thanks to the strength of our innovation ecosystem, I managed to succeed in fintech, and now I'm fortunate to be in a position to help others realize their business ideas. In November 2018, the Mayor published London's Economic Development Strategy, which sets out plans to create a fairer, more inclusive economy that works for all Londoners and businesses. It had three main goals. One, to open up opportunities so that everyone should be able to benefit from all our city's offers. Second, growth, ensuring our economy will continue to thrive and is open for business and innovation. And lastly, to make London a world leader in innovation, technology, and hub of new ideas and creativity. I know 2018 may feel like a distant memory of another world now, but these objectives are still valid and indeed even more vital today as we deliver London's mission led recovery program. COVID 19 has had a profound impact on our economy. It has affected many of our businesses and sectors, particularly those that rely on face to face contacts, such as culture, hospitality, and retail. And it has had a disproportionate effect on Londoners, hitting the most vulnerable the hardest. My focus is on helping to protect and create jobs to ensure we recover from this crisis as a stronger, fairer, and greener economy, delivering on good jobs, good homes, good transport, and cleaner air. London is the economic engine of our country. And just like in a vehicle, if the engine doesn't work well, neither does the rest. But when London's economy is productive and healthy, it can help drive growth across the country. There is no doubt, of course, that we need to do more as a country to ensure that the benefits of the growth in the capital are felt across the UK. London's City Hall stands ready, willing and able to play our part in ensuring a national recovery from COVID 19. Critical to this is ensuring we support our innovators so that London and its wider corridors across the greater southeast remain a place where new ideas are generated and turned into valuable products and services to UK wide benefits. And to that, we must recognize the vital role that the UK Innovation Corridor can play in enabling this. We know that many of you work closely with collaborators across the UK. We are keen to support this work to maximize the diffusion of innovation that will be critical to driving productivity growth nationally. The Mayor and I have been actively reaching out and building bridges with other regions across the UK. For example, one of the first things that the Mayor did on re-election was to travel up to North Yorkshire to meet the newly elected Mayor of West Yorkshire, Tracy Brabin, and to see firsthand the amazing state-of-the-art electric buses that are being manufactured for transport for London by Switch Mobility in Sherburn and Elmet. Supporting an innovation-led recovery and greater collaboration across the UK will be key to leveling up. For example, by setting a target of making all London's buses zero emission by 2014, the Mayor has helped stimulate new innovation and generated orders for UK companies based in places like Scarborough, Falkirk, Ballymena, creating new highly skilled jobs. Absolutely key to our leveling up ambition, however, will be greater devolution across the country, which is something we hope to see in this year's comprehensive spending review. If the 10 metropolitan mayors and their cities and regions are given greater control over funding and powers, this will enable them to target intervention where it's needed the most. This includes more powers over skills, business support, and innovation. Let me give you a flavor of some of our most recent innovation initiatives, which are driving an innovation-led recovery. We are supporting greater R&D collaboration between our innovative small businesses and universities. For example, we are currently delivering with MedCity, whose CEO Neelam Patel is actually also speaking here today, our pioneering Innovate to Collaborate program, London Diagnostics, that provides grant funding and wider support to enable university business collaboration in areas such as testing for cancer, cardiovascular, and other diseases. We've all seen the devastation COVID-19 has caused and how better, faster point of care testing can make a real difference. We are supporting cities' resilience, for example, through grant funding, innovations that address London's core resilience challenges to help the city bounce forward with the pandemic rather than back, from inequality and food insecurity to grappling with air quality, low wages, and poor quality jobs. We launched last year a £1 million Mayor's Resilience Fund to accelerate the deployment of these innovations and support their piloting across London. We are also supporting entrepreneurship and business growth. The Mayor's Entrepreneur Program supports student entrepreneurship through providing grant funding and access to support, including mentorship and training to help young people turn their ideas into thriving businesses, with a particular focus on supporting young people from less privileged backgrounds. And the London Business Hub has, of course, been supporting all our small businesses throughout the pandemic with essential support and advice. We are also supporting the acceleration of existing innovation. We have been active in harnessing the incredible innovation that has been accelerating across the city in response to the pandemic. For example, we rolled out Mayor's Paid Forward London platform, which leveraged crowdfunding from across London communities matched with mayoral funds to help Londoners' favorite businesses stay afloat during the hardest times, delivering over £3 million directly to small businesses. And much of this match funding from the mayor has been put forward, put towards adopting the digital innovations that will help these businesses to bounce forward. We are also supporting greater collaboration. For example, earlier this month, we launched first open call for innovation as part of our collaboration with New York, Berlin, and Paris to work together on joint COVID-19 challenges, such as how to support the revival of the sectors hardest hit, including the culture and creative industries. Look, I'm originally from India, and what has been happening there with COVID-19 is a terrible human tragedy. However, what has given me some comfort in seeing how people have worked together in partnership to urgently help with the provision of critical medical equipment, including respirators. It is amazing what we can do when we work together for the greater good, and the difference innovations in vaccines, medicines, respirators, and rapid diagnostics can make. But with more power and funding levers across our cities, they could do so much more to national benefit. So as I finish, if I may, I would like to highlight our latest campaign, hashtag Let's Do London, which is the biggest in-country tourism campaign London has ever done to support recovery. So this summer, do come to London and visit some of our amazing museums, art galleries, restaurants, shows, and more. Do the zoo, do some shopping, kick off your Zoom slippers and try on some new shoes. Do take a bus made in Yorkshire and sit on the top deck to admire the views of the Thames and the capital's many beautiful buildings, parks, and high streets, as London is open. And we look forward to seeing you again soon. Thank you.
Rajesh, thank you. Wonderful, as ever. And let's do London, of course, for all of us doing staycations. Why wouldn't you? And the connections between London and Cambridge and Peterborough and the surrounding areas are, make it such that we can certainly get up to London and hopefully enjoy the attractions, as you say. That leads beautifully, given that you talked about the innovation-led recovery for the capital as the engine for the whole of the London, southeast, east of England and the wider country. Absolutely. It leads wonderfully into the session that Daniel Zeichner is going to chair now. Just to say, Daniel is one of two of the chairs of our very effective all-party parliamentary group. We launched it 3 years ago. Our first co-chair with Daniel was Kemi Badenoch, and she helped enormously to set it up in a way that Daniel has carried on with and supported in this last 18 months by Julie Marson, who's going to chair the session a little bit later on as well. It really is a good platform to get that message that Ian Duncan Smith said this morning needs to be got into government, regardless of your political affiliations, that this is a corridor that is leading innovation and innovation-led growth post-pandemic and post Brexit, and it's a way of bringing parliamentary colleagues to the table with local government leaders and with businesses. And look, that's what we're focusing on this afternoon in terms of investment in the corridor. So Daniel, with thanks to you for all you do for us generally, and particular thanks this afternoon. Now I'll hand over to you to chair this next session and introduce the speakers and manage the questions. Over to you. Thank you.
Well, thanks so much, Anne, and thank you and your colleague for continuing to do such a good job on promoting the corridor. And can I say to Rajesh, great to hear about London, but let's do London, Cambridge and Peterborough as well. I was out on a hunt recently encouraging people to come back to Cambridge, and I think all through the corridor we can encourage people to come and see and then hopefully invest. And that's the theme of the session we've got coming up now. I'm delighted to be joined by Linda Hasey, the East Herts District Council. Linda's been a very strong supporter of the Innovation Corridor in my time, and I suspect before that too. So thanks ever so much, Linda. Over to you.
Thank you. It's always a pleasure to speak at these events. It's a lot nicer, if I may say so, in the British Library, but we can't really whinge about that. So next time, Rajesh, we will come back to London. So that's hopefully going to be a promise. It's also delighted. It's always great having Anne here as chair, because she always makes you feel so good, because she says such nice things about everybody, and you walk away thinking, hey, do you know what? Politics isn't quite so bad as I thought it was, because actually we're not doing a bad job. And I think that's the important thing, is we are doing a very good job in the UK Innovation Corridor. Now, I'm leader of East Herts, which is right in the middle of the core. So this is called the UK Innovation Core, and it's the bit that sits between Cambridge, Peterborough and London. And I think we've spent some time looking at what the core is all about. And in March, we published a prospectus, if you like, called The Innovation Core, where research and big ideas are translated into successful commercial products and services. And I'm sure John or Kate will put that link up onto the chat for you, and we'll make sure that you've got it all, because it really does lay out the extraordinary businesses that we've got in the core, the opportunities that are there, and what we are doing to make them successful. There are three main areas that as a core we are concentrating on, and we have identified, and these have been mentioned before, but I'm going to try and pull them all together. So the three areas are life sciences, obviously with Cambridge and London either end, but we do have in the middle, we have including Stevenage Cell and Gene Centre, which is working very closely with Glaxo, but also a lot of other businesses. We've got the Wellcome Research plants as a little bit higher up near Uttlesford. And of course, in Harlow, we have hopefully the Public Health England coming there in the not too distant future. So the whole area is very much focused on the life sciences. But I think we shouldn't just look at life sciences as a discrete entity. Basically, it's based on technology. So if we're looking at life sciences, that includes digital, it includes AI, it includes anything else, because all these technologies are now so closely interlinked that actually you need to be a bit like the North Raleigh Research Park, which they talked at a seminar which LSCC the Innovation Corridor organised a few weeks ago, where you get one idea and then it just flows into lots of other ideas. One of the other areas that we're very keen on is advanced manufacturing. Harlow College tomorrow is holding a launch of its courses that it's doing and skills base that it is doing for advanced manufacturing. Because whilst we still need plumbers and carpenters, the whole idea of advanced manufacturing, or MMC, they are very different skills. And it's important that we look at how do those skills become attractive to youngsters leaving school, going into college and thinking this is where I have a future. I think also ICT and digital is absolutely crucial to a corridor like this. We can't go green if we actually have really awful broadband. And I think that's one thing that we have all found over the last 15 months, is you just suddenly freeze and you have no idea what anybody else is talking about. So I think we owe it to our residents, and we also owe it really to our businesses that we actually have substantial investment in the digital infrastructure in this area. And I'm very pleased to be part of the Digital Innovation Zone, the DIS, which is based in the corridor, and which has been phenomenally successful at pulling in money to make sure that some of those infrastructures are there. And I think if you're not a member of DIS, I really would suggest that you find out about it and come and join us, because we have the most amazing presentations. Last week we had one from KO Park, which are building 3 football-sized buildings in the enterprise zone in Harlow for data for the cloud. And it was phenomenal, just what they can do, what they will do. And I think one of the other things that we can say is will come out of that is actually residents will be able to benefit from having that level of technology very, very close. So that takes me on to what's going on in the Harlow Gilston Garden Town area, which is, as both Kevin and Guy said this morning, is a garden town which will deliver 23,000 houses over the next 20 to 35 years, 10,000 of which will be in East Herts district area, and that will be 10,000 which will start being built out in about 2 to 3 years. And it gives us the opportunity of actually making sure that we are able to create communities which are balanced. So it's not just housing, it is a mix of housing and community and the right infrastructure and the right level of jobs and the right level of educational skills are required for doing that sort of development. So one of the questions I was asked was, how do we get to a place that pays? Well, you get to a place that pays by making great places where people want to live. And by doing that, by making sure we build good communities, high quality communities in a way that is green, which is sustainable, which is future-proofed as far as we can make it, then that is where people will want to live there, and people will want to have the sorts of jobs that are now being created in Harlow and around the corridor. Just one last thing about infrastructure. I was an early adopter of an electric car, which is great, and I'm very lucky and privileged to have been able to do it. But an electric car is still a lump of metal that runs around on 4 wheels. So, as someone said earlier, you do not get rid of congestion by just converting everything to electric. So what we need to do is actually make sure that there is infrastructure in place which will encourage people and give them the options of not having to get into a lump of metal. So in the garden town, our aspiration is that within the regions and within the developments, there will be a 60% modal shift That's never been done before, but it has to be done in these areas. So that's walking, cycling, public transport. And for those who are coming in and out of those developments, the garden town developments, it'll be a 50% modal shift. So we're very keen that Harlow Station remains very popular, but I think we have to help people understand that environmentally, we just cannot continue to get into cars, whether they are electric or whether they are petrol or diesel driven. One of the things that's happening in Hertfordshire and going into Essex is the development of a mass rapid transport system, which will run along 414, which is anticipating these sorts of changes. So when we go to Holland, for example, to the Netherlands, to Amsterdam, it's automatic just to get on a tram. We go to Germany, you get on a tram or something equivalent, and they are clean and they're regular and they're functional. And that's what the A414 mass rapid transport is aiming to get to. It's a big project, very long term, but it will run from Hemel Hempstead, right in the east of the county, all the way through Gilston, past Harlow, and up to the new hospital at Princess Alexandra. So the garden town and across the corridor, we are politically united. We are multicoloured, but that means that actually it's a very strong argument for us to take to government, because we all want what is best for this area, because we all know it's a great area to live and to work. Thank you, Anne. Thank you, Daniel.
Thank you, Linda. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for that really, really excellent introduction, really, really helpful. I'm delighted to turn now to Jonathan Martin from Waltham Forest. I love Waltham Forest. So as a member of the Transport Select Committee, we had a day trip to see the mini Holland, and Clyde Lokes took us around. I loved it so much. I took my partner back for out in Walthamstow. You hear that said very often, I expect, but it was brilliant and doing a great job. So if you can spread some of that success elsewhere in the innovation corridor, Jonathan, we'd love to know how you do it, and you're very welcome.
Well, firstly, thank you very much for that introduction, Daniel. The check's in the post. You've done the job beautifully there for me, just in terms of selling the borough. And again, thank you to the Innovation Corridor for the invitation to speak and present today. I'm Jonathan Martin, Director of Inward Investment at Waltham Forest, and we really embrace the whole realm of investment and partnership. So the three things I want to really convey across to you today is essentially certainty, partnerships, and opportunities in terms of development, and how we can deliver that in a coexisting way to deliver high quality. I'm going to speak about the borough briefly, give you some overview, and then take you into some of the opportunities that we've been working through in terms of our particular area, but also in terms of our political ambition as well. So I'm going to just see if I can bring up a quick presentation for you all. I'm hoping that you can all see that. If someone could confirm, then I'll happily kick off and move forward. Brilliant, fantastic. So just a quick overview in terms of the borough itself. We're in North East London. You can see the socioeconomic indicators there in terms of certainly our population and our household. We're a reasonably small borough economically speaking, around about the 6th smallest in London. But we believe we punch well above our weight, and we maintain that as a way to engage with very large investors and really treat them with the kind of treatment and bespoke engagement we would like to see. In terms of a very potted history, 2019, we became London's first borough of culture. That's relevant to this presentation, as you'll see in a few slides' time. We achieved the MJ Local Authority of the Year award at the same time. And then obviously we had last year, which doesn't need any introduction at all. What did we do about it? We did as many did, but beforehand launched our economic recovery and high streets action plans. And we also launched a public service strategy, which is how we were going to re-engage with not just being a local authority, doing the things that we did well, but also doing some things we don't need to do anymore, which we found out through the timeline of going through the pandemic. In 2021, we have a council reset, which pretty much starts next month. And that is going to be how we re-engage with not just our residents, but our businesses and also our investors. It's going to be a complete reset for the council, and I'll come back to that in a little while. Again, building on our economic recovery plans, which form part of that, but promoting the jobs programme, because we've suffered quite hard from the jobs impact of the pandemic, through furlough and so forth. We'll be doing various jobs academies. We're looking at the 15-minute neighbourhood and how we can be more resilient in terms of making sure we benefit from the Enjoy Waltham Forest Mini Holland scheme, which has linked up over 30 kilometres of cycleway and footpath in the borough, and how we can obviously deal with the climate emergency and make sure we bring that forward, which is clearly important for us. In terms of that planning regime, we want to make sure we've got our local plan ready for early next year, and that will be, again, shaping a new destination in terms of the type of borough we want to be. As you can see on this slide, this is our master plan programme. It sets out pan-borough how we want to deliver investment through the actual embodiment of essentially a whole new planning regime, looking to embrace taller buildings, looking to embrace potentially mixed use and intensification around the borough. So we're keen to get involved in all of these areas, particularly around our Black Horse Lane housing zone, Lee Bridge area framework, and also Leighton Mills. We're looking at delivering 27,000 new homes and around 8,500 to 10,000 new jobs. And as you can see on this slide, there's a lot around the borough we want to work with. Of importance, we're looking at how we can bring forward 3 anchor institutions, 2 of which I can tell you about, which is clearly the Town Hall, Fellowship Square, and also Whipps Cross, which is the Barts NHS Trust, which, as you can see, there will be a new state-of-the-art hospital, and also delivering circa 1,600 homes just on the edge of Epping Forest, and delivering a massive change in terms of the public health agenda, which is obviously very, very topical and important at this stage. Forest Road Corridor sits in front of our Fellowship Square, and we think we'll get 1,800 homes there. But in terms of our sort of pièce de résistance, Lee Bridge and Leighton will be the areas we expect to see the most growth as we go through this master plan programme. Happy to share those slides with any members that care to see them. In terms of our cultural programme, we're looking at recovery, investment and growth. Clearly, now is about recovery with our high streets, public health, our network of networks, and how we can animate those streets with culture. Investment is going to go into how we can deal with the local plan to become attractive commercially for residents, businesses and new investors. The infrastructure we've touched on in terms of public transport. Walthamstow Wetlands is a great asset of 211 hectares of natural water capital, which is free, and how we can really maximise social value, which is clearly an important part of the ESG investment agenda in terms of environmental, social and governance agenda, and moral money and high impact agenda. And clearly we're looking at growth, and growth is huge around getting back to that vibrant borough, opening up our thriving nighttime economy offer again, a strong creative sector, jobs and employment, which I touched on in terms of one of the priorities for us, and making sure our communities are connected, which we found through our cultural programme. This was our town hall at the Borough of Culture launch in 2019. So we did light it up and make sure that it attracted over 75,000 people to that event, which was a hero event. This is how the Fellowship Square will look once the development is completed. We're going back into the Fellowship Square Town Hall next week, so we're really excited about that. And we really want to make sure that we can see how we can bring that forward in terms of over 500 homes in and around this site to deliver a whole new community. And again, that will reflect our 15-minute neighbourhood. So there's a lot going on there. In terms of culture, on the far right-hand side, we've got our assembly halls, which is just here. And again, that's a current comedy venue, which is being refurbished and will deliver music, comedy, spoken word, and so forth. Here's an internal picture of the EMD cinema, which is on Hoe Street, which we bought and we are refurbishing. You can see the little image at the bottom, which is the external, and inside we'll have a 950 seat theatre for comedy and so forth. In terms of upcoming opportunities, we've got a big housing pipeline to deliver, and you can see the information there with 60 Bricks as our development company, and our future around new estate regeneration being intended to be brought forward through our estate capacity review. Examples of a green depot, such as Lowhall Depot, is something we want to bring forward under council ownership, and we're really keen to engage with our investors around that particular offer. Now, I mentioned before certainty. We've got to have political certainty, because once you invest in an area, we will look after your investment and take you through a bespoke process to make sure we smooth that path to high quality design to secure a planning permission that meets all of our aspirations. And we make sure we work with the real estate sector around events such as this, Real Estate Live, London Real Estate Forum, to put the borough out there, to promote the borough, to promote our place in London, basically, and make sure we're there living that dream and looking at how we can really embrace potential new investors. Partnership I touched on. We work with all our investors in terms of partners. We will invest with them. We will make sure we give the officer time, but we'll also make sure there is a bespoke service. So if investors do want to come to the borough, they're free to do so. I run an investor tour, which hitherto has been obviously suspended for COVID, but we'll relaunch this year, where you get taken around on an investor tour bus, or cycling or walking, and you will see the hotspots and the growth areas within the borough. And that's an extended offer I will give to any members who wish to come and see how we do this. And then finally, it's just how we deliver that promise around development opportunities being delivered for all that get to our high quality growth agenda. That's my very, very quick canter through. I hope I'm on that 7 minutes, but I'll return back to you, Daniel, and I'm happy to take questions in the next session.
Thanks ever so much, Jonathan, and love the enthusiasm. That's great. Can I invite our next speaker, Tatiana Bartram-Heat from Q&Q. I think it's really important we hear from people who understand the investors community. I'm looking forward to hear what you have to tell us. Tatiana.
Thank you very much. And I'd like to also thank Jonathan, because again, so enthusiastic, and I benefited from one of the investor tours and it was really fantastic. Great location, and obviously it really helps when you have someone that's so passionate about where they are to really feed that through, and it makes everything so much more exciting for the investors. So just going to really touch briefly on everything that's been said today. I've been working in the private investment sector now for unfortunately a very long time, so I'll give it a 20 years and sort of like round down. I've seen a lot of different things over the course of the years on the interest of investors. We are at a critical time at the moment, because not only did we obviously Brexit, so it's very important to mention that, because we have a lot of European investors who invest with us and are could be slightly nervous about how they would choose to invest. And of course, we were all hit by the pandemic, which has again left people with just a little bit more caution than was before. I think the key when we're looking at inward investment is that there has to be a really strong focus on each particular area. You can't please all. So it's really important to have a focus, like the Innovation Corridor has a focus, and that branding and that focus, I believe, is a very, very important point. When investors want to look into something and want to look into the area, they want to know that there is an identity there, but they also want to know other things as well. And Linda, thank you very much for touching upon this. This is really important. It's all about the placemaking. And I have said this before, and I've said this many times, but placemaking is important for the future of investment, because people want to be able to say, I'm going to put in a lot of money today, but actually 15 years down the line, that money is still valid. That money is still being used and utilized, because actually there is a really strong sense of community here. So it's very important that you look at all those different angles. And yes, we have to look at, of course, the angles of, in terms of the climate change impact. But more importantly, when you're living in an area where you can literally just pop down to the local shops, and you don't have to get into a car, and you don't have to do that because you have everything on your doorstep. So be it the doctors, be it schools, theatres, cinemas, all the things that, you know, make living a joy, which we've all missed out on greatly. So, you know, I know we're all very much looking forward to it. I think it's really important that actually people are really looking inward, because if you're happy at home and you have all of these wonderful items on your doorstep, it means it's very much easier to go to the office to enjoy this. So it is very much about that. So placemaking for us has been one of the key arguments that we've brought forward for our international investments, because for us, we understand that the future of the investment is the key. No one wants to spend money today and then have problems tomorrow. So we've been very much focused on that. It's also, again, very important, and I just think it's very important to underline how important, sorry, again, the decision making of the local communities are. One big problem is when a decision has been made and you get the investment ready and everyone is ready to go, and then there are just constant and investors will lose interest. They earmark monies ready to go. If those monies can't be spent, they need to put them elsewhere. Investors are not what everyone just assumes is very wealthy people. Actually, a lot of the investors that I have, they are all financial institutions, but particularly they are focused on pension funds. And pension funds are a great service to us all, but more importantly, they feel very strongly about their ethical investing. And that's one of the biggest things that we've tried to put forward as well. So when there is a cohesive plan which takes into account quality of life for the individuals living there and the individuals working there, it is a very big thing that you could actually literally walk to work and back. And Linda did point out, it doesn't matter how green your car is. If you're using a car, it's still congestion. And also it's just more of an effort, shall we say. So that's another big step for us to take, is to really build around that. So this is important when we're looking at these. We want to know that there is the support of the local government. We want to know that they are enthusiastic and they want to see the growth, so that we can actually build on this together. The private investment will also invest happily with the infrastructure because they understand the importance of having, a good broadband or good travel connections. They understand this. So it's not all onto the local government to try and find the funds, because that's a really, really big task to ask. Especially we don't know where the next penny is coming from, because we don't know how much we've spent or how much we're going to spend and how much there is still left to spend. So this is the time when we can really use this partnership and really work together. Private funds don't have to be a bad thing. They can work very well for a local community, because it means that actually they will have more than if we're just waiting and queuing up for a central government or a local government to be able to invest. So I just want to mention that it's important that we take all of that together, that we work all of those things together. So it's not just the private side, but on the public side, the private would actually give quite a lot of money. And I do believe that that would be really helpful for everyone involved.
Brilliant, thank you so much. And again, thank you for your enthusiasm and positivity. It's absolutely great. Now we've got a few minutes for questions, and I've seen there's some questions in the Q&A box. Do make your points in there. There's a couple which are very clearly directed at Jonathan, so I think I'll start with those. One about the investors tours. I don't know whether you've seen these questions, Jonathan, in there. I can read them if not. Another one about the future of Waltham Forest industrial plan. Would you be able to pick those two up?
Sure. So I'll start with the investors tour, Daniel. These are generally aimed at investors that are either existing investors or investors coming from outside of the borough, and essentially will pick up the growth areas within the borough, and will also approach this from a presentation. So they are generally seen as an overview, as you've had a little taster today, but they will also give you the opportunity for engagement with some of these key areas. One key point just around what type of investors we have. Recently we've been working with an agri-tech company, Harvest London, which is a vertical farm operation, and we're looking at how we can keep them in the borough. They are looking to expand. They're in our growth area near Lee Bridge, and we're working with our corporate property team to see how we can keep them in the borough and keep them doing what they do in a much bigger premises. In terms of the other questions, could you just remind me what the other question was, Daniela, around the second question addressed to me?
The one about the future Alton Forest industrial land. Do you have any plans for that?
I'm really glad that question's been asked, because I can now legitimately bring this into the discussion. We've been looking at how our strategic industrial land can come forward through massive master planning to intensify those particular industrial areas, whether strategic industrial land or borough employment area. So I'm now working with our planning colleagues specifically around the industrial locations in the borough, and how we can bring those forward in terms of intensification, modernization, with some of the landowners that are there. And within that bracket, I'd include the likes of BlackRock, who will all know, Capital Industrial, who will also all know, and we're working with them on how we can intensify what they have there. We're also attracting in new industrialists as well. The likes of Prologis have bought into the borough recently. So there's a whole new framework that's being delivered on how we can really modernise our industrial land, Daniel, and also make sure that it is also relevant and attractive for the commercial and industrial sector, so they can see those pipelines and the runway into engaging in the borough. The key point for us is that we want to protect what we have and enhance it in terms of the standard of jobs and quality that's there, and also obviously address any risks around automation and how we can obviously deal with that in terms of bringing that into a part of this planning process. I hope that's answered those two questions.
Very good, thank you. The second question, which again I'm hoping my fellow panelists can see, I think I'm direct to Tatiana, and in case you haven't seen it, it's the one which is asking about how companies can remain independent, become global giants of the future, and prevent being swallowed up by others. This is a frequent subject of conversation in Cambridge, the so-called valley of death. We're very good in this country at startups quite often, but it sometimes seems we're less successful in keeping them and nurturing them, taking them into the unicorns of the future. Tatiana, have you got any words of wisdom or advice on that?
Yeah, I think actually it's really important that the local authorities actually nurture these small startups. You know, these are, you're right, the unicorns of the future. And we have to nurture them and show them that they are appreciated in that location, asking their opinions, asking what they need and how they can succeed. And by supporting them, what that does is it makes it, you know, running a business is a difficult thing. Okay, so running a business and looking out for all the other parts that might be more difficult, especially if, you know, that's not your forte and your forte is more on the innovation side or on the life sciences, you know, suddenly you have to run a business and suddenly you have to contend with people that have been doing this for a very long time. And you're right, large equity investors or larger firms scoop up the idea and then it's sort of headache free for you, isn't it? You walk away, you've got a nice check and then you leave it. And I think that that's why it's important to really give them the support that they need in terms of helping them understand all the different things that the local authorities can do to help them, but also when they do have an issue, to tell them to come and speak to the local authority because they have a friendly ear. Again, that will really help set the scene and really set the idea of what the community is about. Because the whole point is, it is a community and we need all parts of it. Having individual communities, or sorry, individual companies is a really important and attractive item in investment, simply because if everything's unified and homogenized, you actually, and there is nothing new. So that's why they really do require the support of the local community and the local authorities.
Thank you for that. I have another question for you in there, but I was going to go back to Linda first of all. The first question in there, in some ways, is aimed more at London, but you may have the same issues in East Herts about some basically people who are making money out of hosting others who are actually doing the innovation. Is that a challenge for you? And do you see that down the innovation corridor? And what can be done about it?
Yes, I mean, I suspect, to be quite honest, it is more of a problem in London than it is in East Herts or up the corridor. But I think it is one that we are very aware of, and we need to make sure that we have got the right infrastructure, the right embracing of these businesses and the residents to make them want to make sure that they stay in the area. And I think following on from Tatiana's comments, it is a major problem that grow on space isn't always available, and people do move out because we have not been able to provide the right sort of space for businesses to grow and develop. And I think that's something that we need to address down the whole corridor, because we have very high number of very innovative SMEs, but where do they go afterwards? When do they grow from 2 to 5 to 10 to 50 people? They can't always do it within the innovation corridor in the right location.
Indeed, I'll just chip in helpfully there. I mean, Cambridge obviously was one of the sort of innovators and pioneers in terms of science parks, and we've had a session of them. And of course, it does help. We've got some pretty well-resourced colleges who can make those long-term investments, and they've done very well. Some of them, St John's, Trinity, and others, and that has been hugely helpful, I think, in providing that kind of space for people. But I can see it can be problematic elsewhere. Going to you, Tatiana, we've got another question. Do you think your investors are given the opportunity to provide investment for infrastructure improvements from central and local government? If not, how can we improve the dialogue?
So that's an excellent question, just simply because no, not enough, not by far. I think that there's been such a fear of private investment that whenever it's broached by investors explaining how they would love to help within the infrastructure, everyone is very worried, because they're like, okay, why are you doing this, and what's in it for you? And there's been some very bad publicity. I think the key here is that local authorities are a lot more savvy than they used to be, which is normal. This is, after all, a business too. You know, these local authorities need to have a cash flow. They themselves and be more sustainable in terms of money, where their next dime is coming from and how they're going to pay for the services. This is something that they simply can no longer rely on central government to perform. So the answer to the question is, I do not think that they are given enough opportunity, just simply because I do believe that local authorities and central government can be a little worried about the optics of it. And I do think that I do think it's a shame. I think how we would improve that is actually by having the conversations and trying to be as open and clever about it as possible, in terms of, okay, well, we need something that, you know, we need X, we need the cash. How about, instead of the investors offering, actually the county then say, well, what we need is this, and this is the return that we are able to give. So it can be done in a considerate way where people will really see that it's not just about profit. It's actually about making an area enjoyable to work in, enjoyable to live in. And that's where the private money can help, as long as the local authority keeps control of the situation.
Thank you. Right, I think we've covered some questions that are actually coming from the audience. So I have loads of questions I'd like to ask, guys. So I will ask some of my questions while people come forward with others. And I suppose one of them is the government quite clearly is developing a regional policy, in the sense that I would say we had a regional policy for a few years. They call it level up. For areas like Cambridge, and I would suspect much of the innovation corridor, there is that sense of, well, and I hear it from my colleagues, you lot have had it all. Why on earth would government want to be investing further in what appears to be a successful part of the country? So my first question to you is, how should we counter that? And my second question is, how are we compared to other parts of the country in terms of making that off, in terms of attracting investment here? Because you know, there were some very successful in my regional development agencies 10, 15 years ago in other parts of the country. Now I think local authorities, particularly in straitened times, find it harder to do that kind of work. And what kind of things could we do collectively together within the corridor to be successful? It's quite big questions, I'm afraid. Let me start with Linda from a local government perspective, and then let's go to Jonathan and Tatiana.
Yeah, thank you, Daniel. Obviously, you know that I'm very closely involved with the East of England LGA, so I have a a senior position there. So we do look at things on a regional basis. And obviously Hertfordshire is very different to Suffolk and Norfolk, but the whole area is essentially contributes to the Treasury. And I think that's the thing, is you cannot go around killing the goose that lays the golden egg. Because if you do, eventually that goose turns into a duckling. And my argument with Treasury is, yes, it is very important that investment is taken up the M1 and the M11. However, there are areas within the east of England and the innovation corridor that have to have investment if we are to continue as being a generator of tax positives. So it's not one that's been listened to at the moment, but I think events like this, the events of what's going on in the east of England through ELGA and the Hertfordshire Growth Board, the Essex work that's been done, we are now starting to get that message over. And I think, yeah, we are a good place to invest in. We, as I've said, and as others have said on this call, you know, we are a net importer of people as well. People want to live around here, which is why our housing growth numbers are so high, because of that's where the ONS takes us. But we're good. We've got lots of green, leafy areas. We've got great businesses, and we've got good infrastructure, although a lot of it could be improved. But we have got ports, we've got airports, we've got train stations, we've got everything that anyone could want for a high quality of life. So come and check us out.
Lovely. Jonathan.
I think it's a really interesting question in terms of how can we offer something that delivers sooner rather than later, which always gets the attention of government, I would suggest. And for us, it's around the infrastructure, particularly in terms of public transport. We have a very good road network, obviously being encircled by the A406 North Circular, the M25 and the M11. But for us, we are currently concentrating on Walthamstow Central and what that can do in terms of an upgrade to deal with the pressure that's been previously put on it by usage prior to the pandemic, and also looking at how we can bring forward station improvements at Leighton Central, which is on the Central line, which gets you into Stratford, and also creating a new overground station. We believe by improving these stations and building new stations, you can deliver on both homes targets, but also more importantly, jobs creation and jobs targets. And what we're looking to do is really get a cluster of that investment put forward into discussions with central government, particularly around that yield for new places where we've got these potential hotspots for new homes, new jobs, and importantly, new cultural offer. And I make that point because that also does sell into the overall placemaking agenda, which when you put it in context of the infrastructure that's required and taking a patient investor approach on return on investment, it's a very compelling case. You've got places with heritage and with infrastructure around them that can really lead into this kind of compelling fund and potentially give a much more easy decision to give us some sort of grant funding to deliver some of these opportunities at stations around certainly our borough and the south of the innovation corridor.
Yeah, connectivity matters a lot, doesn't it? Tiana.
Well, I mean, I think that it's really important to say, yes, it's fantastic that the government is looking at investing in different areas of the UK. Of course, it's well needed, but you can't then just starve the innovation corridor of oxygen and say, okay, thank you very much, we're not going to give you any more money. So it kind of doesn't really work either. You can't just sort of go, okay, well, you've done really well now, so off you go and good luck. I think it's a bit more than that. And I think that, you know, that is why it's so important to have the partnerships now with the private sector. Relying on central government is just becoming more and more difficult, just simply because, you know, everyone is stretched. You know, there is only a finite amount of money and it is stretched. So it's important to just keep up the infrastructure so that, you know, and, you know, both Jonathan and Linda have said these really important points. You know, the infrastructure, knowing that actually it's a very good place to live, that knowing that it's everything is on your doorstep, it makes it a lot easier for smaller companies to, you know, to be able to grow, because they know that actually their staff are happy. Their staff are happy because they have a wonderful location. So it's really important to look at that. And remember, here we have to again say the local authority, or, you know, the local government are the friend of the business. You need to be working hand in hand. And as I've said as well before, the local government now, they are having to act like a business, because that is unfortunately the way of the world. They are going to have to seek income. And that's why it's important for us all to look at this now, sooner rather than later.
Lovely, thank you. Well, look, that is perfect time. And can I thank all of you for excellent contributions, really insightful and thoughtful and stimulating. This is going to be a key issue, and in many ways is the raison d'etre, I'd say, of the innovation corridor. How we make the case and explain to people just the opportunities that there are, but also, and it's a point I frequently make, that just because places have been successful in the past, and Cambridge is often seen as a great success story, you just cannot guarantee that that success continues unless you make the right decisions. Because we live in a global world, there are plenty of people who would like some of what Cambridge has got, and there are plenty of places where people who make Cambridge successful would go elsewhere in the world. Unless we remain sensitive to the needs of investors and businesses, we are not going to thrive. So thank you all very much for your contributions, and look forward to speaking with you and see you again in the near future. And takes me on to a sheer pleasure and joy for me to introduce Dr. Johnson, I was going to say the newly elected, actually he's been elected a while now, Mayor of Cambridgeshire and Peterborough. We had a very good relationship with the Innovation Corridor, with James Palmer, your predecessor. But Nick is a long-standing friend of mine, so as I say, I'm very delighted to be introducing him, and delighted that he can address the conference today, I'm sure, on many occasions. Nick, you heard some of the discussion we've had already. I know it's playing into many of the things that you've been working on already, and we look forward to what you got to say to us today. Nick.
Thank you, Daniel, and my apologies, I haven't been able to be around for more of the actual whole conference. I can see from some of the speakers who've gone before, and also what I have listened to, it's obviously been a fantastic event. Yeah, and I'm very touched that I had an invitation to sort of introduce what's happening up here in Cambridgeshire and Peterborough. So, as I say, first of all, can I start by saying how delighted I am to be with you all this afternoon, speaking at an event that really demonstrates the powerful potential of collaborative working across our regional boundaries. It's clear that there's an appetite today to drive truly inclusive green growth, which creates unrivaled opportunities for our people and our businesses. Now, for those of you who've not met me outside of politics, I'm an NHS children's doctor, and I still hold on to that role, doing a day a week on a Tuesday. In fact, actually, I'll be doing an immunisation clinic for COVID-19 at Peterborough this weekend. For many years, I've been simply known as Dr. Nick, but since May the 10th, I've been Mayor Dr. Nick. I've always been someone who is totally passionate about public service. And now that passion is in my mantra, and it's the ethos that is now going through the organisation of the Combined Authority. The 3 C's of compassion, cooperation and community. These values are at the centre of everything we do now in the Combined Authority. They're not just words. For me, they're about creating the conditions of success. They underpin investments into transport, housing and skills, enabling businesses to thrive and helping people to reach their potential. As an NHS doctor working in Cambridgeshire, I've been hugely inspired by the pioneering work in our region in thriving life sciences and the medical technical sector. Our unique alchemy of academia, R&D and entrepreneurship has created a local economy that can accurately be described as a national treasure. When we looked towards AstraZeneca, for instance, headquartered on the buzzing Cambridge Biomedical Campus, to help rid us of the terrible COVID-19 pandemic, it helped deliver a vaccine faster than most of us thought possible. Now, as someone who has actually worked in vaccine research, if you do your due diligence, you can even find a shared paper with Dr. Nick Johnson and a certain Professor Andrew Pollard. I take a particular interest in their work and their success. Others in our talented tech army of academics, researchers, scientists and business leaders have been engaged in the battle against the virus. It is proven what happens in Cambridgeshire and Peterborough matters to us all. But I'm also acutely aware of both the long and short-term challenges faced here in Cambridgeshire and Peterborough. Housing is astronomically expensive. Transport infrastructure has not kept up with our economic growth, and it is way too carbon heavy. We're not productive enough by the standards of our global competitors, and with skills deficits holding people and business back, we need to make a change. Now, I know many of these challenges are shared right throughout the innovation corridor, and they're also felt along the Oxcams arc. And just to make that point, it's not the Oxcam arc, for me it's Oxcams, the whole of Cambridgeshire. In many cases, the persistence of some of these systemic issues can be measured in decades, not years. But the fact we have a shared challenge speaks to one of my 3 C's, cooperation. Our dynamic enterprises compete, attract and sell globally. They do not think in terms of the local boundaries. Therefore, working with you, partners right across the innovation corridor, will be important, not just to me and our combined authority, but it will be the absolute focus for developing fresh solutions to realise our true potential. In terms of these solutions, it's as good a place to start as any with transport, and why we need a system shaped by the 3 C's. In and around the city of Cambridge, we are lucky to have some of the United Kingdom's star assets, not just life sciences, but artificial intelligence, education and digital tech. Inward investment from across the globe meets a unique entrepreneurial startup culture. Sustaining growth here is a project of national importance. To keep that happy mix going, the streets must be livable. To spread its prosperity to other Cambridgeshire communities, the city must be accessible. For the sake of everyone's health, the air must be breathable. I'm a doctor, why wouldn't I want good air quality? Cooperation, again, is key to making that happen. I absolutely rejoice in working together, that's cooperation, between the combined authority, councils, City Council in particular, and the Greater Cambridge Partnership and Cambridge University has brought a new Cambridge South Station within reach of the 2025 opening. We will need more of that spirit to make sure the new station is a focus for real connectivity between rail, buses and active travel, so the world-beating biomedical campus can flourish. And I want to put that community and cooperation at the heart as we move to a new vision for public transport, including mass rapid transport for all of Cambridge and its surrounding area. I've made it clear that I don't think a hugely costly tunnel metro is the way going forward, but I have a lot of other good ideas and I'm working with all agencies to make it happen. The voters agreed with me on that, but that is because I think there is a better way. In one of the cleverest communities of the planet, we can work together to solve the challenge of crossing a medieval city centre by public transport, bringing car use down, improving air quality, and giving more people access to excellent jobs and education. The Greater Cambridge Partnerships, the local councils, and the 2 universities employ some of the smartest people of the world. I would love to have gone to it, by the way, but I wasn't smart enough, and I intend to cooperate with them to develop one of the smartest city transport systems in the world. But you in the Innovation Corridor know that our most morally important challenges aren't in world-famous cities. The compassion of that I put at the forefront of the 3C is all about remembering the places that the governments have forgotten for generations. Not so much levelling up, but let's not forget them. The urban estates and the rural market towns are where low productivity jobs, low earnings, low expectations, and worst of all, lower life expectancy, which I see time and time again across all ages, has been the rule for too long. So I've asked my new team to reinvent our transport strategy, to put the success of the Fens first, and to support Peterborough as it claims its rightful place as an investment destination of choice. The evidence is compelling. Cambridge is 60 miles from London, but the journey takes under an hour, and London salaries are only 20% higher than Cambridge salaries. Wisbech, a beautiful Georgian riverside town, the historic home of the anti-slavery movement, is only 40 miles from Cambridgeshire. But guess what? The journey takes an hour and 3/4 by inadequate roads from Cambridge, and the salary gap is 40%. The values of community and compassion require me to think about a currency, connectivity. I've insisted my team work at a pace on the statutory assessment for an ambitious franchising plan to transform the public transport in the Fens in Peterborough. We'll soon be announcing the details of a demand-responsive transport pilot in Huntingdonshire. I've begun the public engagement on road improvements in St Ives, and why shouldn't high-tech rapid transit benefit people in Wisbech and March? I want our metro learning to be applied in the north of the county, and why not get that working even before it rolled out in the south? My aim as mayor is to help the left behind places to do a lot of catching up. If transport is all about good connectivity, then business is about strong networks and clusters. As the northern pivot for both the Innovation Corridor and the Oxcams Arc, we are part of a golden triangle between London, Cambridge and Oxford. Key growth sectors across the Innovation Corridor will only reach their potential if we continue to foster those strong connections. The Cambridge Life Sciences cluster alone is home to 400 companies, employing 15,000 of some of the world's most talented people and contributing almost 3 billion annually to the UK economy. There are around 470 life science companies based in the combined authority, which is currently just under 8% of those in the UK, includes current global behemoths like AstraZeneca, Amgen, Pfizer and GSK. We asked the local champions like Abcam and Bicycle Therapeutics have grown up from fledgling startups to recognized global brands in recent years. It's a success and there is capacity for further growth. It's not just down to the city and its surrounding science parks. This innovation corridor connects the combined authority to the capital via the research centres of your Hertfordshire's, your Essex and the international airport at Stansted. Indeed, excellence in life sciences in itself extends right down the corridor. The emergence of King's Cross as a global life science hub and the success of Stevenage development has the potential to create a cluster of truly global scale in the 46 miles between the two nodes. In this way, the UK Innovation Corridor has the potential to be more significant than the Oxcam Arc, who said competition wasn't a good thing. Given the existing transport connections and the string of activity along the length of the corridor, it should be noted that the distance between San Francisco and San Jose, the two ends of Silicon Valley, is 40 miles. 40 miles, 46 miles, sounds familiar. In Cambridgeshire and Peterborough, we're doing our bit to sustain and enhance our key growth sectors. We're working to ensure that the area's economic base grows by harnessing our innovation ecosystem and leveraging Cambridge's position nationally and globally, especially around life science, AI and data technologies. And as with transport, we need to ensure focus on the whole region, bringing innovation-based growth to Peterborough and the Fens and creating greater opportunity for people and business and tackling inequalities. But how do we do that? We're on 4 priority sectors which make our economy special: agri-tech, advanced materials and manufacturing, life sciences and digital. We have been able to develop a clear blueprint for our future investments into these sectors. The blueprint is our 4 sector strategies, which will be the catalyst for regrowth here and right across the innovation corridor. Each strategy has been developed collaboratively with sector-specific stakeholders and businesses, and each strategy details a series of recommendations that will remove growth barriers and increase the sustainability, inclusivity of the growth we deliver. Recommendations include a new Life Sciences Innovation Fund and a new Smart Manufacturing Alliance, an improved business support and finance programme for high growth companies, better focus our adult education budget, apprenticeships, funding and capital investments into further education and higher education to tackle shortages, an investment into internationally competitive digital infrastructure, including at least 1 gigabit broadband speeds across the region. To successfully deliver these outcomes and more, we will need to work together and we will need the cross-regional engagement the corridor facilitates. These strategies can mesh with the work being done across the innovation corridor, and it comes back to cooperation and willingness of the region to be more than the sum of its parts. And finally, I'm sorry to keep this going on about these issues, but there is housing. In Cambridge, the average house prices are more than 10 times the average wage. We don't build enough homes and we suffer from a shortage of affordable housing. The public health implications of housing crisis are already clear, but we can't tackle what hasn't been seen as an intractable crisis without working collaboratively. There's another C again. Cambridge City Council has shown the way and has helped build 50 council homes. We should learn from its example. As a combined authority, I want to build stronger connections with government to deliver the affordable housing our economy needs. Partnership working is paramount across Whitehall. Our local authorities, housing associations and local people to bring forward new homes that meet need now and deliver a sustainable pipeline for the future. The Innovation Corridor can be a community of opportunity. The most successful economic zones in the 21st century will be those that put people and the environment first. And that's the priority here. These will be the places that will matter. So yes, we want to protect, spread and grow that particular economic magic, which turns transformational research and ideas into commercial products and services and global businesses that improve our everyday lives. But we understand to achieve this ambition, we need to continually attract and retain the brightest, best and most energetic talent. But we won't do that without desirable, well-connected, healthy and greener communities that people want to call home and that people can afford to call home. And we can't do that unless we embed those core values I mentioned at the start. In my case, the 3 C's: compassion, cooperation and community in every single bit of work we do. By working together up and down the corridor, we can and will rise to our challenges, and our collective talents can help us achieve the potential today's event has so excitingly demonstrated. And if there's anywhere in the world that can deliver on that, it is here. So remember the 3 C's: compassion, cooperation and community. We are, after all, called the Innovation Corridor, and this is where it should start. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nick, and thank you for that commitment to the corridor. I think that your words have been very, very welcome. It has always seemed to me that in a country which now has quite complex governance arrangements, we are in some ways fortunate to have mayors at each end of the corridor, even though the corridor could look a little bit further as well, exactly you were suggesting, into parts well beyond the city of Cambridge. But I think we can make more of that in the future, and I know that you will be helpful in that. So thank you so much for that, and we look forward to working with you in the months ahead. And I think we're probably heading for another break now.
Yeah, Daniel, if I can, we are. Can I just to guide people into that, because we've got 2 or 3 minutes. Say first of all, thank you to you, Daniel, for chairing that session and for introducing Nick. And look, thank you, Nick, to you. It's just been great to hear your priorities, to hear your inspiration, and to hear about your way of working. Because what I'd like you to take away from this is really my answer to Linda Hayes's comment at the beginning about, oh, well, Anne's so nice about everybody that it makes me feel good. And, you know, we do collaborate well and I feel good about being a politician. Well, actually, that's not me, as it were, living in airy fairyland. It's because the politicians along this corridor, irrespective of their parties, have collaborated. They have shown compassion of each other and each other's different ideas about solving problems sometimes. And they have put their communities and our joined up community at the forefront of things. And as somebody who actually lives in the middle, as everybody knows, of the arc, because I'm based in Milton Keynes, although I worked for 5 years in Cambridge. But I know that the basis of the political collaboration here, it gives another C to this. It gives another C. It's about a culture, and it's a culture and a way of working and a shared vision. So having you come into that, and I hope you will meet some of those other politicians who run their local councils as well. New one in Essex, who's been part of the corridor for some time, who spoke this together with our politicians. I hope you will all feel that this is really quite a pivotal moment now for the Innovation Corridor to use your skills and resources as politicians with the private sector, as Tatiana has spoken about today, and to take the case to government, not to rival the ARC, because actually, as our little map there shows, and I've been trying to get people to think of the geographies sensibly, that this is about complementarity for London, the South East and the East of England. And it's about an articulation of those different geographies working, you know, in a sensible and collective but focused way. So your congratulations, I should have said, your contribution to that, everything you've said today, really, I have to assure you, fits beautifully into that. And I do think that there'll be a way in which we can work with you and with the Mayor in London and with all our politicians along the corridor to make this case to government much more strongly. And that, Daniel, will help the argument that you said we needed to muster up about the levelling up to put that in a different way to government. Look, thank you, everybody. We are ready for a shuffle break at 3:20. Just grab a glass of water or go to the loo, and we'll come back for the next panel literally within 5 minutes. Thank you all, and stay well and safe. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Well done. Very good. No.
Well, welcome back, everybody. And Julie, huge apologies to you. I think I inadvertently sliced 5 minutes off your time there, but I'm sure you'll make it up. Great to see you. Thank you for giving us this time. I was saying earlier about my heroines, and I should have included Linda Hazy, by the way, Linda, if you're still listening. But Julie, who's been an MP for probably less than 18 months good, I'm glad you're still there, Linda, really hit the ground running, has picked up this innovation corridor, is forever speaking up in Parliament about us. She's absolutely bang on message, but actually more importantly, she knows what she's talking about when it comes to inward investment and business, which really helps, which is why it's great that you can chair this panel for us. So I will remove myself from the conversation and put everything in your capable and good hands. Thank you, Julie.
Thank you, Anne, so much. Thank you. It's a very nice introduction. Thank you. And it's true that being the Member of Parliament for Hertford and Stortford for just about 18 months, just over 18 months, is the privilege of my life. And yes, like many people have said before, we do it because a lot of us are here because we believe in public service and we want to make a difference in whatever way we can, really. Hertford and Stortford, as Linda Hazy has said, is at the core of the innovation corridor. So it's very much close to my heart. And so, yes, I do try and mention it too in Parliament and the Chamber as much as I possibly can. And I must say, using my chair's privilege here, I also sit on the Treasury Select Committee, and the 4 priorities that Linda and the Innovation Corridor team have identified are completely spot on, I think, and they're actually 4 core topics for the Treasury Select Committee, you know, which is recovering from the pandemic, looking at post-Brexit, international relationships, levelling up, and working towards net zero. So they're really, really spot on, you know, topical, really important priorities, I think, for us all, you know, particularly in the Innovation Corridor. So it's a pleasure to be here, and it's a real pleasure to be chairing a session with 4 fantastic speakers. So we're very, very fortunate to welcome Neelam Patel, the CEO of MedCity, Ryan Combs, the Executive Director of the North Carolina Research Triangle, Aaron Rosland from the Canadian High Commission, and our own John McGill from the Innovation Corridor. So welcome, everyone, and thank you. So I'm going to hand over first, if I may, to Neelam to say a few words.
Thank you very much, Julie, and thank you to the organisers for inviting me. It's really a pleasure to speak at this fantastic event. And well, by way of introduction, MedCity represents a life sciences cluster for London, and we work alongside other organisations along the innovation corridor and beyond. And together, we aim to boost innovation and investment in the region, securing the UK's position as a global science and innovation superpower. That sounds really motivating, and I really mean it to be motivating, because I think we all stand behind that. So why is MedCity important and why are clusters important? Well, if I just focus in a little bit on the area that we particularly have networks and focus on, London and the Greater South East has nearly 50% of the UK's life science companies, 4 of the world's top 10 universities, and 19 of the top 20 global pharma, and is home to major tech companies as well as phenomenal research institutes and multitude of specialist hospitals as general hospitals and primary care. So with all of that, there needs to be a means of navigation, and this is where MedCity steps in, and we predominantly support innovation and inward investment in 4 key ways. So if I just talk about this very briefly, first of all, we act as a landing site, or a means where particularly international companies, but also national companies, feel that they can land and have an organisation that is able to connect them and be an advocate for them amongst the complexity that there is. Secondly, in particular with very R&D intensive companies, many of them require space and infrastructure. So what we also have are connections into the ecosystem whereby we can lead them to where the right laboratory space and the infrastructure space is to allow them to grow. What we also do, which is possibly hidden, is through this engagement, there's a great deal of insight that you can get in terms of challenges and opportunities that these companies bring. And we're then able to transfer some of that insight to policymakers and to the sector, and particularly real estate developers, local boroughs, to advise them on where some of that demand is, which is crucial actually, because more and more, it's not just about the company in space, it's about place and how these companies can work with the local community to actually generate that growth and bring about jobs that not only benefit the company but the region as a whole. The third thing that we focus on is expansion. So when companies are here, we help them stay and grow. And not only that, we help them export. And this is where the international linkages come in. And MedCity, like some organizations, are very neutral in how they work. And we're able then to convene sectors to address challenges that may arise through some of that growth. So market access challenges, for example, regulatory challenges. And finally, we're a small and pragmatic organization. We believe in having programs and tactical things that allow companies to get to where they want to get to and allow that collaboration between the ecosystem. So for example, we have an investor community and an angel community that we curate so that they're able to invest in some of these startups that find difficulty in getting finance. We offer funded collaboration programs with our research communities, and we focus on some core areas which we know are strengths of the region, for example, advanced therapies, diagnostics, data and digital. So that, in a nutshell, is a little bit about what we do. Thank you, Julie.
Thank you very much, Neelam. Perhaps I could ask Ryan to say a few words, please.
Sure, thank you so much. It's an honor to be on the call with everybody today, and someone who spent 14 years working for elected leaders here in North Carolina. I really appreciate what y'all are trying to do, and I'm proud to tell a little bit about background on the Research Triangle region of North Carolina this morning. I also wanted to start off by first saying that, our state has a wonderful existing relationship with the UK. UK subsidiaries are supplying close to 40,000 jobs in North Carolina right now. And our region alone, GlaxoSmithKline has about 1,500 employees here, GKN Driveline, 700 employees. So we've got great British companies here in both the Triangle and the entire state of North Carolina. And we export close to $1 billion to the UK from North Carolina every year and import about 1.7 billion of products from the UK. So great existing relationship, and we certainly want to build on that. I'll give you a brief background. I'm going to talk fast just so I can cram as much in as possible, but North Carolina, centrally located on the eastern seaboard of North Carolina. We're roughly a day's drive from 65% of the US population. We're one of the fastest growing states in the country, 10.5 million residents. We're the 9th largest state in the country, and we're projected to grow to exceed 12 million residents by 2030. We've got the 11th largest GDP in the country, and if North Carolina was a country, we'd have the 32nd largest GDP in the world. So a lot of stuff happening here. And then if you look at the Triangle region alone, which are the 12 counties in North Carolina that I represent, there's 100 counties in North Carolina total. We represent 2.1 million residents. We have 12 colleges and universities in our region. 47% of our residents have a bachelor's degree, and we have the 4th highest concentration of PhDs in the country living in our region. I want to take a moment just to kind of tell you how we got there. We haven't always been that way. North Carolina was traditionally a tobacco, textiles, and furniture state. A couple of interesting stats for you. In the 1950s, North Carolina farmers produced 850 million pounds of tobacco. And 4 of the top 5 cigarette brands were in North Carolina, and they produced over 250 billion with a B cigarettes a year. And so, but you know, our elected leaders at the time saw we were one of the poorest states in the country. We needed to do something to evolve and diversify our economy. And they saw an opportunity in the Research Triangle area, which is, I'll tell you how we got our name. The name comes from the fact that we have 3 Tier 1 research universities within, I heard Nick talking about the 40 miles in Silicon Valley. So our 3 research universities are basically about 25 miles apart from one another: North Carolina State, UNC, and Duke, University of North Carolina and Duke University. But so a group of business leaders in the 1950s got together. They said, you know, we've got these great universities. We've got people coming here, going to school, but then they leave. We have this significant amount of brain drain of people leaving once they graduate. We need something that will keep students here after they graduate. And so the idea of the Research Triangle Park was born. They had this idea of turning this farmland in the middle of these 3 Tier 1 research universities into a research park. And so that idea came to fruition in 1959 with the idea. In 1965, IBM announced they were going to build a development and manufacturing center in the RTP. That was the first client. And then I have to thank the British, because our first life science company was Borough's Welcome in 1969 came. They moved their American headquarters from New York down to the RTP. And really, we haven't looked back since those 2 companies came. We're now a life science and tech hub. That's kind of how we got created. Today, the Research Triangle Park is the largest research park in the United States. We've got roughly 300 companies and 50,000 employees every day going into the park to do business. And it really has just benefited the region and the state. And as I mentioned, they're all being fed. The workforce is all being fed from our 12 colleges and universities that we have. I mentioned the 3 tier research universities that we have here, and they're doing about $3 billion a year in research. Duke is constantly ranked as one of the top research universities in the world, and UNC has one of the top schools of public health and pharmacy in the US. And most of the federal research dollars that Duke and UNC are receiving are coming from the National Institute of Health. And then you also have NC State, North Carolina State University, that complements Duke and UNC because they're more of an engineering and agriculture school. And in 2019, NC State received more US Department of Agriculture federal funding dollars than any other university in the United States. And so it's really that federal research and the research that's being conducted at these 3 tier 1 research universities, which is really driving the innovation that's happening in our region today. Because of the research that's being done at our universities, we now have angel networks at all 3 of our universities. One interesting stat I'm looking at WIN, which is Wolfpack Investor Network, that's NC State's. NC State is now the number 3 startup university in the country for schools without a medical school. So doing a lot of great things here. That wasn't always the case, but over the last few years, Carolina just recently, another interesting statistic, Carolina, UNC Chapel Hill was the #1 recipient of NIH funding to study COVID, only behind the NIH itself. So a lot of great things happening there. And then because of what's happening at the universities, we now have 3 different venture arms. We've got Hatteras, Pappas, and Alexandria. And we're also attracting a lot of outside capital from outside the country. Most of the venture capital money in the United States is either in California or Massachusetts or New York, but we're doing a really good job of being able to attract that money in. And in the past, when companies would go out and try to get this money, the VCs would want the companies to move to wherever the VC is located. And what you're seeing now is a lot of these VCs know what's happening here, so they're allowing those companies to stay here and thrive. So really excited about that. And then our startup ecosystem, we've got several incubators and accelerators here that work very closely with the companies and especially with the spinouts from the university. And as I mentioned, you know, we really have become, all because of this one thing that happened in the 1950s, the Research Triangle Park, really spurred creating a melting pot for innovation in healthcare here. I mean, we're constantly classified as either the third or fourth largest life science hub in the United States because of all the assets we have here. CROs, we have hospitals, both Duke and UNC have medical schools. We've got the clinical expertise. We've got the technology coming out of the university as well. And as I mentioned earlier, we have the workforce. We're now home to over 500 life science companies. And as I mentioned, most recently, they classified us as the 5th largest life science hub in the US. But just a lot of great things coming. And just recently, I believe, is the next, go ahead. Just since January of 2020, in the life sciences alone, we've had $5.15 billion of investment announced here and over 5.6 thousand jobs announced. And that's just in the life sciences. If you look at our total investment since COVID, we've had 11 billion in investment in the region and 18,000 jobs, including Apple just recently announced that they were going to build a tech hub, 3,000 jobs. And then Google is also building a tech hub here, 1,000 jobs there. And then Fujifilm Diosynth is a life science company, a Japanese, and they're going to invest close to $1 billion alone. So a lot of great things happening here. While you know, COVID's been devastating globally, we've certainly benefited here in the Triangle region. And then this is a really interesting statistic. According to our Secretary of State, we had 61,000 people file for business license in North Carolina from January through April of this year. In 2021, that's a 75% increase in 2018, 2019, and 2020. And then, you know, I was asked to talk about how we help companies grow globally. You know, the U.S. Commercial Service does a really good job. They have an office here of helping local companies when they're looking to expand globally, of identifying markets where they think they can fit and grow. And then we also have something called SBTDC, which is a statewide organization that also one of their core missions is to help North Carolina companies grow globally. And then we also have a British American Business Council here that both helps North Carolina companies who want to expand to the UK, as well as helping UK companies that want to expand here in North Carolina. They do great work here as well. And then, you know, we really act at what we can do for international companies that want to come here is we're kind of a one-stop shop. Part of my job is helping connect interested companies with the partners that we have here, including our chambers that I just mentioned, our U.S. Commercial Service, our venture capitalists, lawyers, and experts in all the fields that someone needs. So we're really a one-stop shop to help companies land here. We're home over 700 international companies here currently. So, you know, I'll just close out by saying, you know, I'm really excited to be a part of this conversation today. I'm learning. I'm excited. I believe we're going to bring a small delegation over there in October. We certainly would like to reach out to everyone while we're there. We want to build partnerships and collaboration opportunities. And we just need to do a better job on our end of just letting you know what's going on here. But I look forward to the conversation today, and I'll turn it back over.
Thank you so much, Ryan. And coming from North Carolina, I represent Hartford in Hertfordshire, which has great and very old links with Hartford, North Carolina. So I think we've already got some links going, but that's really interesting to hear. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
And Aaron, also from great friends of ours from the Canadian High Commission, thank you for being with us. Perhaps I can invite you to say a few words as well.
Oh, I'd be delighted to speak. It's a pleasure, really, very much to be here, Julie. Thank you so much, and thank you to all the other people on the panel and those of you in the audience. Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak. Again, my name is Aaron Roseland. I'm a Canadian diplomat based here in London, and I am indeed in London, and I represent the province of Ontario, which is one of the provinces of Canada here in the UK. Ontario is actually the largest province in Canada in terms of its economic power. It's what I would say the 40-40-40 of Canada. It's 40% of Canada's GDP, 40% of its population, and 40% of its manufacturing output. It also has the second largest financial services sector after New York, and the second largest tech sector after California in North America. So we're quite a strong entity, not only in Canada, but also in North America. It's a real pleasure to be able to represent Canada in the UK because there are very long established connections, both from a social, a cultural, and a political and a defense background. And we really look forward to enhancing those relationships as Britain charts its path in a new direction, a new world. And we'd be very pleased to be able to continue to work with our partners, both at a national level as well as at a regional level. The ways that we work with companies, my responsibility is commercial diplomacy. And we really do that through three areas. The first is helping our companies export to the UK. And that is essentially connecting our companies to buyers, distributors, agents on the ground, and providing them with coaching that helps them understand how to do business in the UK. We also work to attract investment, and that is really to help UK companies scale up into a new jurisdiction in North America. And I'm afraid, Ryan, one of our goals is to attract that investment away from the US into Canada. But we're very happy to work with our friends in the US, largely because of the strong trading relationship that we have with the US. $1 billion a day flows between Canada and the US. The third area that we work in is partnership, research and development partnerships. And this is really forms a basis for a lot of the work that we do, because we believe that research and development is the basis of trade and development, economic development and investment attraction. So those are the three areas that we work in, and I'd be very happy to speak a little bit more about what we do. Some background information on Ontario and UK-Canada relations. In Ontario itself, there's about 200 UK companies that employ 40,000 employees in Ontario, and we're very grateful for those. And one of the things that we do is work on what's called aftercare to ensure that those British companies are not only present, but are thriving and are able to thrive in Ontario. And in terms of on a UK and Canada commercial relationship, the UK is Canada's 5th largest commercial partner globally. It's the largest partner for us in Europe. And there's about $31 billion of trade two ways that happened in 2020. So that's a very much a tour de horizon that I can share with you today. Look forward to talking more.
Thank you very much, Aaron. And just a reminder to everyone, please put your questions in the Q&A if you have questions. And I'll hand over to John from the Innovation Corridor, who, again, is a very good friend of the Innovation Corridor and everyone here. John.
Thanks, Julie, and good afternoon, everybody, and good morning, Ryan. And it's great to see you all. Just leaving that map up there because it's sort of part of the backdrop of the conversation today. So I won't be rude as a host and take up too much time, but just to make a few quick points. So as that map shows, and we've been putting out pretty much all day today, it puts the corridor in the context of other innovation and tech corridors. We are part of the Golden Triangle, London, Oxford, Cambridge. We're very, very pleased to be part of and contributing to the growth and re-emergence of the east of England. And we are connected through London into the southern aspect there, Gatwick, and the coastal capital sub-region down there. So we're very pleased and proud to talk about our collaborators. The corridor itself, and there's a number of statistics which I won't give you too many, but one of them which I think is of note is the economy of this corridor has grown 35% faster than the UK average, and that is very impressive, but it also throws up some of its own challenges. In terms of productivity, per head of population, this corridor is £14 per head more productive than the rest of the UK average, I should say. Business growth has been again about 35%. Employment growth has just been under 20%, and not dissimilar to Ryan's stats, about 44% of the population is educated to at least first degree level. So that's very impressive. But of course, like all average figures, it does mask over some of the disparities within the corridor. So there are nodes, Cambridge, London, and by London I particularly mean the King's Cross area, are real boom areas, and there are other areas which haven't grown quite as quickly, although on the whole they've developed in the last economic cycle quite impressively. So a lot of the work we do is focused on, and those of you who've been on the conference for most of the day will have heard it a few times, on the spaces in between London and Cambridge, and then just to the north of Cambridge, going all the way up to Peterborough. So these are places which may not be as familiar to international colleagues, places like Harlow, places like Stevenage, and then Broxbourne and Bishop Stortford and Hertford, even though there's another one in North Carolina. But these are names that are not possibly as well known as Cambridge and London. And it's important that we do project and promote them. We are developing a brand and a narrative for those areas as the places, and it's been mentioned a few times earlier on, as where some of the research and development can be translated into products and services. And that's partly because they've also got a bit more space. One of the challenges of some of the hotter parts of the economy is they have been, and the pandemic will have affected it slightly, but the expectation that they will re-emerge as very hot spots. So land prices in particularly for employment space and research space in Cambridge are getting quite high, even in global terms. So they are starting to get up to the research triangle figures, and even beyond that into the Boston type figures. And that's a worry. It's nice to hear that, but it's also a worry because that can start to stifle growth. And there'll be a similar story in central London. Not ignoring what Neelam said, there is space, but we have to work really hard to make sure that space is used effectively and intensively. So these are challenges, but this is where places like Harlow and Stevenage do come into their own, because these are some of the release mechanisms. So that's a lot of what the corridor is about. It name checks London and Cambridge, but it's places in between and just to the north of Cambridge which really matter. So we are very much about collaboration. It's almost the word of today, and that's why we've got Ontario and North Carolina, and this is why we're very keen to reach out internationally, because although at one level there is a sense of competition, but it's more about giving businesses in our corridor a footprint in North America, wherever that might be, Ontario or North Carolina. If you two guys want to fight out to win the best companies, we'll leave that to you. But our mission is to project them and make those connections to support people, and vice versa. As businesses from your areas want a footprint in the UK, and dare I say a footprint into Europe as well, we'd see this area in London to Cambridge as being a good place to look. It might not be the final destination, but it's certainly a good place to look if you're in life sciences, digital technology, agri-tech and so forth, advanced manufacturing. So that's a sort of quick run through of the story. As I say, we are about collaboration. We want to do that within the UK, and it's important that the UK recognises the benefit of having this corridor with the economic growth that it brings. But it is also about our international collaboration, and this is one of several webinars that we've done, and we certainly want to work through that with Department for International Trade and develop that much more strongly. So as I said, I won't take up too much time as a host, that would be rude. So I'll hand you back to Julie, and hopefully there'll be a bit of a chat around the Q&A. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, John. And we are relatively short of time, but I'm going to try and précis and summarise some of the questions that have come in the chat. And perhaps I could go back to Neelam and ask about clusters, actually. We talk about the cluster of the innovation corridor being so important. In terms of making it easier and more effective for a company to grow and land for export markets, for example, how important is it to be a part of an established cluster?
Well, that's a great question. It's a really good question to be answering it with colleagues from the States and Canada, actually, because I think we can all appreciate that markets from a company's point of view need companies need to be educated in terms of the challenges of entering into different markets. And this is the real value of collaboration internationally. And I think clusters play a part in raising awareness of those markets prior to these companies landing. And then when they do land, they are given some hand-holding and support, a bit like an address book and a tourist map that they can then use to make the relevant connections, which is so much different to perhaps accessing a portal or a website, because it is the warm and the warm connections that are vital for a company landing. And then, as we've talked about, there are various interventions that a company needs to then establish and grow, and many of these support services are available already, from investment to finding space. But still, I think the connectivity of a cluster and the sense of belonging to that community is hugely important. I can't emphasize enough our experiences, whether you're a big company like GSK or Merck landing, which we've talked about, right through to a small company. They all need elements of that, and that's where clusters come into their own.
That's great. Thank you very much. And it's good to know, because that's what we're trying to achieve here. So that's very good. And Ryan, some people have mentioned in the chat about companies that have received, in your sort of verbiage, federal government national support, I suppose. From what you do, how important is it for organisation like ours and yours to work together? And also, how much is national government support important to what you've achieved and what you hope to achieve and that we would like to achieve?
Let me start by talking about the incentive piece. It's not a national incentive piece. The state of North Carolina is the one that awards a incentive for a company. And unfortunately, if we could do away with incentives today, we would. But the reality is that, especially in the South, if you look at Alabama, if you look at South Carolina, some of these other states, they give out massive incentives. I mean, Mercedes changed when they moved to Alabama. It changed the landscape. Now all the automotive stuff's happening in the deep South. But so it is in the nature of the beast that the states have to compete and give incentives. Now the state of North Carolina, I feel like we're kind of middle of the road. It's not a cash incentive. It's based on tax rebates for what you're paying for your customers. It's customized workforce training. So that $8.7 million that someone mentioned, the state of North Carolina, part of that money actually goes to the customized workforce training that comes from our community college system, which I would say is probably one of the best in the country at training employees. So when if GSK comes and says they're going to add 300 employees, they can go to the local community college, train the community college, who in turn trains the employees. So GSK doesn't have to worry about that. So we do state, and then from local, I told you we have 12 counties. Every single one of our counties will do some type of incentive. And most of the time it's based on the number of employees. And then the state of North Carolina also bases incentives based on where the urban centers, where most of the people are, they don't get as many incentives as some of the more rural areas. And that's what we kind of try to do to promote companies going into, more rural communities in North Carolina. So that was the first question you asked. And then you were asking, I'm sorry, what was the second part of that question?
I think I was asking about how organisations such as yours and the Innovation Corridor, how important is that to learn from each other and work together?
Well, I think we're both, we're both trying to solve grand global challenges. And I think it makes a lot more sense to be trying to work together. You know, the issue we have here in North Carolina, and I've seen it with our ag tech cluster, is that we're late to the game. We've done a horrible job of promoting what's going on here. When you go and you talk to other organizations throughout the world, you know, they know about UC Davis, they know about Purdue, because they have massive international offices, and we just don't do that here in North Carolina. So that's why I really wanted to portray today that we're doing some great research here in the Triangle. We're open to collaboration and partnerships. Our universities are hungry for that. It's just, we've got to get our message out. And that's why I'm so thrilled to be a part of this today.
Thank you very much, Ryan. Well, you're very welcome. And if I could turn to Aaron, I know we're short of time, and I'm going to ask you a question that's probably not easy to answer very quickly, but you mentioned commercial diplomacy, and we've talked about the fact that there is competition. There is competition, you know, within a country and globally for investment and so on. Is it even possible to prioritise or to make a list of what are most important, whether it's access to local finance, local networks, whether it's access to local talent and education, a location? I mean, can you even prioritise and put a list together of what companies need to think about, and what we can help to offer companies as they look to invest here and abroad?
Do you know, I think I'm really glad you asked this question of me, because I'm not sure it's a question of prioritizing what companies need. But I would say commercial diplomacy, in my mind, is something around what I would call P3 diplomacy, and that's public-private partnership. And that's really speaking to the Mayor of Cambridge, his point about collaboration. And actually what we can offer to companies is not necessarily telling them about all of the talent or the innovation, but it's actually creating, having industry, academia, government, all working together in an area to provide support for companies. One of the things that we've done to implement P3 diplomacy is actually something called the Next Big Idea competition. And this was about creating a linkage between Birmingham and Toronto. And it was essentially trying to help scale up companies do business in Ontario, and Ontario-based companies to do business in Birmingham. And this was developed as a result of some investment by government, both the UK government and the Canadian government, my office, law firms, accountancies, incubation centers, as well as universities. And it provided 3 weeks, all expense paid trips for the winners of these competitions. There were 6 of them, 3 on each side. And really, this allowed them the opportunity to explore what the region was going to mean for them and what was essential about that region and whether that would work for them. And that was, I think that really speaks to the experiential nature of investment and the need for companies to actually experience regions themselves. But it was also unleashing the power of collaboration. And that's really what government can do. They have convening power. They can bring in disparate players and target them towards shared goals and a vision, but also then fulfill some individual objectives for themselves. For the law firms, it was having access to new clients. For the accountancy, it's the same. For the UK government, it was about investors. For us, it was about investors in trade. So I think for me, it's not just about the promotion of what a region has to do. It's about the self-organizing nature of a region that allows companies who you're really targeting to experience that region for themselves and understand how it works for them to do business in your region.
Thank you very much. I feel we've just touched the surface of this subject and what we could learn, but I really do appreciate your time, your engagement and your expertise, and thank you very much for joining us. And I'm conscious of the time, so I shall hand back to Anne, because I know we have George next as well, my great colleague. Thank you, Anne.
Well, no, thank you, Julie, and thank you, panel. As you say, just touching the surface of it, but with some real gems in there, and a lovely collection of thoughts and people and loads of stuff that we can do. which is a great introduction to you, George. Thank you so much for joining us. We started our session this morning, and you'll be pleased to know we haven't had a lot of drop-off, which is fantastic, with Sir Ian Duncan Smith, who almost trailed, really, the work that you've been involved in. He actually held up the Task Force on Innovation, Growth and Regulatory Reform document and gave us a terrific start to our conference. So thank you for coming and, as it were, tailing it, but I'm sure you will top it as well by what you have to say, and then that'll lead into a panel discussion with some of our key companies. Some of those, maybe all of those, you know, because of course your background is in venture capital and life sciences, which makes you so suitable, not just to be the MP for Mid-Norfolk, but to be here with us. So thanks, George. I'll hand over to you.
Pleasure. Thanks for having me and for pulling this together. It's a really important event, and I've just been looking at all the attendees, and it's a brilliant team of people, and it's great to have American colleagues and others from overseas. Look, what I thought I'd do is, for those who don't know me, a very quick summary of where I'm coming from, because it'll disclose my prejudices and kind of particular experiences. And then I've got 3 big points I want to make, the last of which is to tell you what the Tigger report is really about, and I think what we could do with it. But for those who don't know me, I'm George Freeman, Member of Parliament for Mid-Norfolk, elected in 2010, grew up in Suffolk, Norfolk and Cambridgeshire, educated at Cambridge, and left in '89 and had a 15-year career in and around the Cambridge cluster, from a baptism of fire in a startup to 4 years in the UK's first biotech venture capital fund, to running a couple of companies which we sold, and then running a specialist bioscience corporate finance and consulting business before being elected. And then was lucky enough in 2010 to be able to get an audience with David Cameron and persuade him that in the teeth of the post-crash economic crisis, the UK didn't just need an austerity program, we needed a growth program for serious long-term growth, and that we should start with the life science sector. Difficult to imagine now, but back in 2010, the pharmaceutical industry was beginning to leave the UK because we're such a slow and low price payer through the NHS. Pfizer was closing their R&D headquarters, AZ were moving to Massachusetts. And my argument was, look, there is a revolution coming in life science. Genomics and informatics are going to totally change the way research is done. And we need to grip it, lead it, and shape a 10-year industrial strategy and give industry a compelling reason to come to the UK, because it won't be highest prices in the NHS. It'll have to be something else. And we set that strategy out, and I was lucky enough to become Minister for Life Science, the first UK minister. And interestingly, we did 2 White House visits, huge interest in America in that transatlantic potential for collaborating. And actually, if Brexit hadn't interrupted, where we were going next was to grow a broader franchise in what I call the bioeconomy, the appliance of bioscience, food, medicine, energy, and our growing and deepening understanding of the biological systems of life to tackle those global grand challenges. You know, by 2050, we have to double world food production on the same land area with the same amount of water and energy. Well, that is a global grand challenge, and the UK has been a sleeping giant in agricultural science. We still win, I think we're number 2 in the world, number 1 per capita in terms of science, but we've been terrible in recent years at commercializing it. So I then led our second industrial strategy for agri-tech, and with David Sainsbury, Chancellor at Cambridge University, we set up the Norwich-Cambridge Agri-Tech collaboration and Agri-Tech East, and we pulled in major investments into the UK and into the Eastern region. And then I went to number 10 as chair of the Prime Minister's Policy Board with Theresa May, and then back to government as Minister of State for Decarbonisation at Department of Transport. Left the government last year, and I spent this last year doing 2 big things: setting up a Global Health Resilience Commission to make sure that we harness COVID as a catalyst for much more serious pricing of health and valuing of health and costing of disease, to make sure that we never again grow a model of global growth that leaves us susceptible to not just infectious disease, but the obesity and respiratory related chronic diseases, which have led to the US and the UK having far higher mortality rates and costs than we should have had, and this TIGA report. So my sort of sole mission, both in private sector and in public, in government, has really been the promotion of what I call an innovation economy, by which I mean an economy that is fundamentally about innovation, not just an economy that has a little bit of innovation. And my sort of first point really is a macroeconomic point here in the UK. I think we've run a 40-year economic cycle since the 80s based on consumerism, house building, city, and sort of booms in asset inflation that's driven consumerism. And it's not sustainable. It's not sustainable economically. The crash showed that. It's not sustainable environmentally, and it's not actually reliable in terms of long-term growth. And my argument is that the pace of technology sweeping the world and the UK's phenomenal strength in science and our phenomenal strength in the City of London as a global financial institute, if they were properly connected and we created a proper ecosystem for innovation and we actually adopted innovation in our public services, we have an opportunity to be a genuine innovation nation and unlock a 50-year cycle of growth, helping to drive sustainable growth around the world by using our aid budget to support technology transfer in agri-tech, clean tech, med tech, to help Africa and the emerging nations to leapfrog the dirty model of clunky growth that we led in the UK and help them move to smart growth quickly. And frankly, that would be a global contribution, I think, that would give British citizens a sense of pride that Britain's best days are not behind it. And it would be a very smart economic move as well. So I'm totally committed, as passionate as I was when I started in venture capital, that we have an opportunity and we have to seize it. And it's really in that context that I was delighted when the Prime Minister asked me to do the TIGA report. I won't, in this conversation, unpack for our American friends some of the barriers here in the UK, but I would just say, to me, the UK is a cluster. And from San Diego, Shanghai, and Singapore, Norwich fighting Ipswich, fighting Southampton is ridiculous. We need to set out one message, one country, one vision, one cluster, and a very strong message internationally. And I think that is really important. And as an East Anglian MP, when I see people in Norfolk saying, we don't want to be Cambridge, I just have no patience. And my argument is, folks, in San Diego, Shanghai, and Singapore, we are the Garden of Cambridge. And we should go with that and build an East Anglian economy, which has great connectivity. So you can come to Norfolk and buy a house for a tenth the price you can in Cambridge, whip down the Freeman Innovation Express train straight into the middle of Cambridge, and go on to Oxford if you want on the East-West line, which I finally got over the line as minister. You know, we create an integrated economy and spread the growth out, because in the end, innovation doesn't happen in a silo. It's led by people with families and people with lives, and they want to have a good quality of life, good education, good countryside. They do not want to be sitting in a traffic jam for 2 hours to get into Cambridge every morning. So there's a whole lot of domestic policy which I'm pushing hard. But my first point is we need to think of ourselves as a global innovation nation and focus on those global challenges that I think, I can't remember, I think it was Ryan mentioned just a moment ago. Second point about clusters, and there's been an awful lot of academic work done on clusters. For me, the best definition of a cluster was one that tempting though it is to steal for myself, I attribute to my former chairman, Dr. Andy Richards, CBE, who's one of Cambridge's leading angel investors. And he put it very clearly to me over a bottle of wine one night. A cluster is a low-risk place to move your family to pursue a career in a high-risk sector. And it's a low-risk place because if your job in the startup doesn't work, it doesn't matter, there's 100 others. It's not a low-risk place to move your family. The schools are great, the landscape's great, the society's great, the city's great, the place is a great place to live. And that test is a key one because some parts of the UK haven't quite reached that critical mass. I did a lot of work in Scotland 15 years ago, and it's getting there, but you know, Glasgow is not yet a low risk place to move your family from Cambridge to pursue a high risk career, just because there isn't a critical mass yet. And it's that critical mass that is really key, and the connectivity is really key. So my second point is, you know, I'm really pleased on your map. To me, the London, Cambridge, Oxford, Norwich, Ipswich, it's a triangle, really. And it is that connectivity that's key. And that's why I was so passionate about getting the East-West Railway from Oxford to Cambridge through to Norwich and Ipswich. Because, I mean, weirdly, when I was investing in Cambridge, the Cambridge Angels hardly ever go to Oxford. And the reason isn't the traditional loyalty, the disruption, you know, the competition between the two universities. It's who wants to spend 3.5 hours in a car driving on a summer's evening to an event in Oxford? No one does. And in my experience, most angels want to invest within about an hour of the school gate so they can pick the children up after school. They do not want to be driving 6 hours. So having a fast train that can get you from Oxford to Cambridge, onto Norwich and to Ipswich, connecting the digital in Norwich, the Norwich Research Park, Europe's biggest science park for food, medicine and energy, the integration of those three, the digital in Cambridge, Rothamsted, the Crick. It's an incredible triangle, and it, you know, that connectivity is now coming, and in my view, 30 years too late, but we are now finally gripping it, and it's incredibly exciting place to come and invest. Thirdly, Tigger. So look, I mean, for those of you who weren't immersed in the Brexit debate, I was a pretty noisy Remainer. My heart was for independence and sovereignty, but my head told me it would be 5 years of disruption, chaos, low growth, and would send a very bad message to our international investors about our future. And but the British people having voted for it, we now have to make a success of it. And I was really delighted. The Prime Minister rang me up on Boxing Day to say, look, the deal is done. And now, George, it's all about recovery, regeneration. All the life science work you did 10 years ago has come good. We now need to do it again in these new sectors. And we need to frame a proper, serious post-Brexit regulatory vision. Would you join Ian and do it? And he'd read my report warning the EU that the pace of technology meant that it has to speed up. And it's no good taking 10 years to pass a regulation for e-scooters, or 10 years passing a bill for gene editing, because gene editing will have been, or, you know, the pace of technology will render your law out of date. So what we've done in the Tigger report, by the way, the civil servants wanted to call it the Regulatory Opportunities Task Force, which I quickly spotted was rot, and suggested we call it the Task Force for Innovation, Growth and Regulatory Reform, giving the PM a nice line, putting a bit of Tigger in the tank of the British economy. We've really done three things, and Ian may have explained this morning. The first section sets out a proper, coherent, intellectually coherent, politically coherent framework. And my argument is, look, regulation should be taken from being viewed as a sort of something, a sort of reluctant compliance distraction from business, to an absolutely fundamental part of the UK's global leadership in science and technology. If we set the regulatory standards, lean in and get on the front foot, whether it's on AI, in AI or nutraceuticals or cannabinoid medicines or any of those new sectors, history suggests that those who set the standards build consumer confidence and investor confidence. And whether it's in autonomous vehicles or e-scooters or nutraceuticals, that regulatory security is key to investor confidence. And so the first section sets out that vision. The second section, I wanted to give the PM some tangible action this day, not just an academic report. So I've set out 10 sectors where, if he's prepared to be bold, which I think he is, we reckon he could unlock several billions of inward investment within 2 or 3 years. And boy, do we need it. Growth is at pre-Brexit had dropped down to 1%. We've got a massive post-COVID debt legacy. We cannot get growth by concreting over the whole of the south of England. And my argument is the best way to get to 5 or 6% growth is to be home to some industries growing at 100 or 200% a year. And that's the fundamental case. So those 10 sectors are, in my view, ready to go. And interestingly, the PM has given it a very warm report, very warm welcome, and then said, George, would you do the next one? Because there's probably another 10 sectors we could do the same in. And I'll just close, Anne, by saying that the real key, I think now, is to show industry appetite for investing. The report has landed well, but I can tell you that in departments where ministers make decisions and officials are in charge, there will inevitably be a degree of not invented here, well, you know, we're already doing it. There'll be a lot of just friction, and the PM really wants to land it. And the most important thing, literally in the next few weeks, will be to marshal and demonstrate real investor interest. And the more letters that pour into number 10 saying, this is really exciting, we would like to sit down and talk with you about how we could invest, I think the more chance we've got of getting it over the line. And it's clear to me that we could do something very exciting. And crucially, it's really about the integration of sectors. We're very good at funding in silos in the UK. And I learned very powerfully as trade envoy for the UK in the Philippines, the power of that convergence. When I went out to Manila and I was told by the Foreign Office officials, they won't be interested in your science here, Minister. It's all primary economy, concrete and dams and bridges and roads. And what I discovered is the Philippine economy is basically owned and run by about 10 families. And when you have dinner with them and discover they've got Bentleys in the basement and Burberrys and Scotch, and you know they love the British thing. Actually, the conversation ended up with me saying, don't you really want to be building a higher tech economy here, reducing your dependence on China for energy and having some smart medicine and some smart energy? Wouldn't you like to come and see the Lotus in Norfolk, powered by Formula One biofuel made by genetically modified bugs breaking down agricultural waste? That's life science working for you. We actually ended up with 3 inward investment groups coming back to East Anglia off the back of what was supposed to be a trip the other way. And that just revealed to me how powerful that convergence of technologies is. So I think this corridor cluster triangle is really powerful globally, and I'm delighted to join you and talk about how we can support it.
That's really super. And I'm sure that we can support you, I have to say, in those 3 points that you've just ended with, in terms of our letters from the private sector and wherever to just help move that along. And just for your information, George, no, that was very complimentary to what Ian did. So it's just been fantastic. Also with us, and they again might not have been with us this morning, but thank you for being here today to discuss this, are 3 of the key people and key companies that can, I'm sure, pick up and respond to and maybe question what you have said, so that we can fill this out a bit into a discussion. We've no particular order here with things, but we've got Andy Williams from AstraZeneca, Bridget Bard from Biosure, and Lee Mile from KO Data. Why don't we start with you, Lee? I'm just so excited by what you're doing, and I'd love to hear your response to George and anything else you'd like to say.
Thank you, and thanks everybody. Delighted to join. I wasn't able to be here this morning. I've spent a day with investors, so that's obviously a good thing. But I felt George actually was touching on the bones of levelling up. Funnily enough, you know, we're getting into the detail of what really needs to happen to help people, you know, become connected into, you know, make decisions to move around the country, you know, and prosper, and not just be in one area. So it just, sorry, George, that just really resonated with me. And then connectivity. So, you know, I come from a background of connectivity, a lot of that digital. And one of the things that we really hope to be for the region here at KO Data, and just to let you know very briefly, data center provider, quite specialized in that we can handle the most demanding computers that are made today on the planet. Why are they demanding? Because they run really hot and they gobble up lots of power. So we provide lots of green power, truly green, fully renewable, and we can get the heat out and we can keep them running, and critical infrastructure. And we have the NVIDIA supercomputer in here, Cambridge One. We've got EMBL EBI in here, for example, and a couple of other, not so big, but other supercomputers and other customers. So actually connectivity and the ability to interconnect with, say, a cluster, back to clusters over, in the direction of Oxford or east of here, or indeed in the mainland, and to have these communities of research and development and specialists able to basically put their good work in this facility here, and model and develop and create AI platforms that help them really gain what they need to out of their data sets, these huge data sets that they're creating. But then be able to interconnect with either other branches of their business or collaborations with other institutions around the world to become a greater sum of the parts. And we need legislation, and we need basically, frameworks that enable that to happen continuously in a low friction but secure and responsible manner, which then means for this region, we're a hub, we're a destination, you can pass through digitally, or we can encourage you to come and be close to this facility, and hopefully enrich the region, but then also interconnect with, across towards Oxford, or even over to Heidelberg, for example, over in mainland Europe. And I think that, being agile, in legislation, having a level of agility in frameworks and reforms and how we can trade digitally, I think is critical for us. So it can help prosper or really connect talent, across the region, across hubs within the country, even going up to the northwest, sort of the Daresbury area, for example, as well. And at that point, create a UK hub effect. I'm sort of playing to your tune here, really, George. That you mentioned quite a bit on travel, physical travel, if that's. But I'm also thinking in terms of being able to interconnect and really provide facilities for digital hubs around the country. Life sciences comes to mind because we've got a lot of that going on here in our facility. But and interconnect that around Britain, but then beyond.
Did you see the recommendations in the report on digital? Because a fundamental part of what I was trying to argue is, again, we need to stop thinking in silos, because if we there's a big section on clinical trials and digital health, and my argument is that for too long the medical community in the UK has viewed sort of digital health, Fitbits, Apple Health as a sort of slightly wellness consumer, sort of not really mainstream. And my argument is that is a fatal mistake to make. We need to integrate the front end consumer wellness with the back end of deep life science. And if we do that properly with a proper digital framework, we'll be able to recruit into trials much more quickly, segment. But equally, digital is fundamental to proper metrics for agri-sustainability, proper metrics for accountability for the quangos in terms of what they're doing on reform. So I'm trying to make the case that we need to create an agile and digital regulatory framework.
Absolutely, and I remember, I don't know if it was 10 or 15 years ago, I got involved in forums a bit like this, talking about net neutrality, for example, and and now we've sort of moved on from that. That doesn't seem to be quite such a concern anymore. I think, George, with the proliferation of devices that are out there, collecting real-time data. I mean, your comments about Fitbits and so on. The advent of preventative medicine that will save the NHS untold millions, billions. The numbers are too big for me to comprehend. And having that data sort of be able to move with your consent. I know that's a contentious issue, but let's maybe just put that to one side. You're buying the peripherals and you're gathering this data, and you're connected then to your GP through a platform. But then you're also, this data, when it's becomes big data, the trends. I'm a X-year-old male with a certain type of lifestyle, and that data set, and there's I have a cohort group, and then there are patterns and whatever.
Yeah, I used to run a predictive toxicology AI company, and we've recommended in the report that AI is finally approved as a medical device. But the really interesting bit of this is that if they adopt our recommendations on digitalizing patient observed outcomes, then you can start to open up nutraceuticals. Again, Beneforte broccoli, Benecol, a lot of this stuff. The FSA says it's not a food, and the MHRA says it's not a medicine. Well, we have to create a framework to link the two, And if we digitalise patient observed outcomes properly, then we can start to build an evidence base for properly regulating. So I think there's, I mean, I get the power of big data in healthcare, that was my career, but what's really exciting, I think, is if we could create an integrated digital platform for sharing data across sectors, then you start to really unlock some new growth.
I agree, and I think the data that can be harvested or offered by us as individuals, provided, and this is where a little bit worried that maybe people like Google and so on are being demonized to a level, and make people wary. But I think if we get the frameworks right, and then we can offer our personal data, that enriches and is going to help accelerate the great work by the scientists and the experts out there, and legislation that gives us confidence as the individuals, the citizens, that maybe offer that up through devices, wearables, all that good stuff, that exciting stuff that we read about. Then and it aggregates up. It ends up somewhere like where I'm sitting right now in Harlow, and being modelled and so on. Then if we have legislation and frameworks and we can settle the public with being additive to that, and they have the trust, the possibilities are huge. And it's a bit evangelical, but actually, I think on this call right now, we all know that that's the case. We just need the wider public to be given a reason to believe that it's for the good, and have the trust as well. But I'll stop there. I mean, I'm hugely excited by it. We play a part in it. We're probably at the least, maybe at some level, the least sort of glamorous end, here. But we have to keep the lights on. That's what we do.
What we do, and we need both glamour and lights on. Yeah. Bridget, tell us where you fit in. I think somebody earlier on, you run BioSure. So tell us a bit about that, and how, listening to George and the conference, you fit into the picture of things and into the future.
Yeah, so I'm CEO of BioSure, and we're a diagnostics company, and I think our biggest kind of claim to fame is that we developed and launched the world's first approved blood-based HIV self-test. So it's a test you do at home, you prick your finger, you get your own highly accurate result in 15 minutes, and we sell in the UK through direct consumer, through Amazon and places like that. We're in Boots, Superdrug, Lloyds, we work with the NHS. So when we came to market, so the UK was 2015, we were the highest risk medical device ever to come to market. So regulatory approvals is really, it's very much integral with our business, and we've now got global approvals. We're in 4 continents, so that's all gone quite well. And I'm Essex born and bred, so we're based just outside Harlow, actually. Lee, we're in Nasing. And we really do actively collaborate with manufacturers, startups, research and developers across the UK, and actually also in the US. So I think for us, the location here, as I say, kind of Essex is where my roots are, so I get the upheaval of moving to another corridor. But I think it is very exciting, the prospects of the rapid development within this corridor. Obviously, from a global perspective, we're always considered as London. Pulling that out towards the Cambridge region adds general credibility, and I completely agree that it should all be, everyone should be working together rather than trying to segregate which region is in which department, because it does just add friction, and it's an unnecessary layer, I think, that's in between. I mean, during the COVID pandemic, we've actually developed another self-test based on our HIV technology that will tell you if you have generated neutralizing antibodies. So whether that's as a result of recovery from infection or whether that's a result of vaccination. But we have not, and I've discussed this personally with Boris Johnson as well, we've not been able to bring that product to market in the UK, which is quite ironic, as we have a European CE mark, and there's just, it's not even to do with the new UKCA, it's seen here as too high a risk device make it to market. So I think looking at the bigger picture, bringing it down to a local level, but really looking at the global landscape, that's where it's got to be driven to, because I think this region has a huge amount to offer, both from end to end, from entrepreneurship, startups, you know, through to the GSKs and AstraZeneca's. There's not much that's missing from this region. We just need to all work together to accelerate our development, I think.
Yeah, well said, exactly. Well, and we need to have the relationships, the environment, the context, the politics, all helping with that as the vision. George,
yeah, I think I think where the friction lies, especially with the regulatory environment, we are so consumer facing. So you know, we have a massive dialogue with a large community of you know, followers and customers, which is why we work so much with startups, because we can help them on their commercialization route. So at the moment, there's almost a disjunct with what the consumer market wants. We fully understand self-testing. BioSure was founded on that, and we're passionate about it. But from actually routes to entry in the UK, there is definitely a disjunct that exists.
Okay.
Can I ask, Bridget, did you find the MHRA supportive? Because in my view, I mean, they're a brilliant regulator. I mean, literally 10 out of 10. I used to be their minister and I do the annual review, and my only criticism of them really was, this was back in the day, 2014, 15, 16, was that they were a bit light on digital. And I wanted them to digitalize their protocols more, digitalize and embrace digital medicine. But some people have said to me, look, they're really good on mainstream medicines, but on kind of new consumer OTC testing, they've got a way to go. And I'm just interested in your experience, because if we get it right, my argument is people come to the UK to get the test, to get the first data, the proof in man, the first concept, and then say proven to work in the UK, put a Union Jack on it and go global. It's really important that our regulator is quick.
Yeah, I totally agree, George, and I'd love to have a chat with you offline. That's exactly what we did with our HIV self-test. Everything we've ever done is UK developed, UK manufactured, UK invented, you name it, and we put Union Jacks on everything. So we sell it, you know, across the world. With our COVID self-test, we literally cannot get through the MHRA. We've discussed it, we can't, and so now we have a point that actually we might be launching in the US, and we're already, you know, selling into Europe before we sell a British product in Britain, and we have hit a brick wall with it. So I would really love to chat.
Can you drop me a line to tigger@cabinetoffice.gov.uk?
Yeah, absolutely.
TIGIR.
Thank you very much.
We'll make sure you get the details. Don't worry, it's being recorded, but somebody will pick that up definitely.
Brilliant.
And it's great that you've raised it, Bridget, because this is what this conference is about as well. Having to do things on the web when you're not having the conversations that you sometimes have over a cup of coffee is quite difficult. So, but you wouldn't be where you were if you weren't bold, and we love that. So great. So look, Andy, you do everything for us. AstraZeneca turns up at every conference. You're a great supporter of the Innovation Corridor, and we're very, very proud to have you personally and your company in it. What do you want to leave us with this afternoon? Because we're bringing a long day to a conclusion very shortly.
As you'll have hoped, Anne, I'm going to be very brief. I'll just say global behemoth, but still stuck in my back garden for the last 18 months. Hi, George. So I pick up on three things then. Digitising, massive potential of NHS data. It will transform medicine discovery and trials in the UK, but it will, George, as you know, require a huge level of investment to create the interoperability and the infrastructure required. Is there any chance we can get a task force like what we had with the vaccine task force? Everyone says how great that was and how we have to embed it, but actually we've talked about digital, well, you said you've been talking about it for 10 years, me probably slightly less, but it'd be nice if we could actually, if we are going to get there, it's going to have to be a huge effort. It's not just going to happen by us having fireside chats about it. My second puzzle is around spatial planning. probably more relevant to some of the people on the, I'm trying not to do too much life sciences, given that we could just spend all our time on that. Spatial planning, that you're right. I think, John, you said that the market in Cambridge is red hot. Commercial space is extremely limited. Lab space, not office space. Local plans coming out. How much of that commercial space should be just expanding in Cambridge? How much should it be in the Arc? How else it could be? There's various views going on around at the moment. It's a very interesting and hot topic in the context of Oxcam Arc. So we should think a little bit more about that, and whether you just let the market decide, or whether we try somehow control that. And obviously AstraZeneca being asked all the time what our view is on that, and I don't know is the answer. And then finally, your industry appetite for additional investment. A well-known Treasury Minister said, yes, we are going to go up to our 2.4% of R&D, but we're going to do it in innovative ways. Whenever Treasury tell you you're doing something in innovative ways, it usually means they're not going to give you the money, as you know. I'm not sure, it might have moved on a bit, but in the last ARIA funding was something where we'd identified that perhaps industry weren't as engaged in that discussion around ARIA funding as they might have been. So pushing back to you, it's fine to say, industry come forward and say, yeah, you're supportive of your 10 initiatives, and we, just gets us down the dotted line. We've just got to continue it. I know you do it, continual battle to make sure that the civil servants and central government don't, from their bubble, give us all the things that they think we want, and it turns out to be the opposite of what we want. And I will leave it there, Anne, because I know we're short of time.
Can I respond, Anne, quickly?
Yeah, go on.
No, we're fine for time. You do respond, George. That's, yeah.
Well, they're typically from Andy, they're absolutely bang on. Look, each in turn on digital, as well as you'll notice in the Tigger report, there's a whole section on clinical trials and digital health. I did a huge amount of extra work on those with John Bell and various others, because James Bethel and Matt Hancock want to put them right at the heart of the life science strategy this summer. So we were doubling up effectively. And my argument is to the Prime Minister, look, if you really want to shift left, get into prevention and learn the lessons of COVID, that population health is hugely valuable, and drive that, catalyze those new alliances of companies like AZ, who are really leading in the new pathways, in the new digital partnerships, earlier detection, targeted therapeutics. If obesity costs the West Midlands 4 billion every year, Treasury figures, then surely we could establish a partnership model where we say, if you could reduce that cost, you can keep 20% of the saving every year. And that would catalyze new partnerships of people saying, did he just say we could keep 10% of the saving? And you'd start to see, I think, Medtronics, Fitbit, Apple Health, a whole new consortia coming together to drive population health. And on digital specifically, it's really clear to me that if the machine keeps pushing digital health as something pushed for the convenience of DH, for its own administrative back office functions, and it'll fail. We need to make the case evangelically for digital health that it's fundamental to patient safety, fundamental to research. People should be lobbying, why are my patient records still being carried around on trolleys in paper and cardboard? From a safety point of view, patients should be saying, this is a disgrace. Why isn't our healthcare system digital? And I think if we really root digital health in the front end of, my suggestion is 3 big disease portals in the UK. Let's be the first country to put 1 million patients on a diabetes portal, 1 million patients on a rare cancer portal, 1 million patients on, you can pick your therapeutic area, and 3 place-based portals. Let's put 1 million patients on the Greater Manchester Healthier City portal, the West Midlands Healthier West Midlands portal, and perhaps a London portal. And you then start to see people saying, I've got a diagnosis, you're now on to the diabetes portal, swipe your Freeman consent bar, share my electronic medical records to the charities for research. The charities will deal with pharma. You'll start to see, I think, we could create very strong clusters of empowered patients helping to drive access to trials, consent and research. And you'd also begin to create those front-end portals for reducing the cost of disease in place. And I think we've got to take digital from something in the back office of DH and NHS England to the school gate, where people are proudly saying, are you on the Healthier Birmingham programme? It's actually brilliant. You get points for taking the bus. You get points for going on a bike. You get points for, it tracks whether you take any exercise. It's, you know, really exciting Olympiad of healthy living. On planning, which links neatly, Andy, funny enough, I was on the phone this morning to Robert Jenrick on precisely this point, saying, if we continue to just build homes in the Cambridge triangle between the M11, the A14 and the A11, if it just becomes a massive housing estate with no green lung, no parks, no space, it won't be a science park, it'll be a car park. And a real science park like the Borough Park has a beautiful Jacobean house, ancient trees, parkland, and incubators. And a real science park, a real innovation park, to me, has got to have that high quality of digital connectivity, but also physical connectivity. And my argument to Robert is, instead of letting the volume house builders just dump pretty badly constructed brick and boiler boxes all across East Anglia, why don't we build a beautiful new town on the Cambridge-Norwich Railway and on the Cambridge-Ipswich Railway? Why don't we use those railway lines, use the stations to create little 5G business hubs and units so that startups in converted farm buildings in East Anglia can be digitally connected and very quickly get on the express train to Cambridge for a meeting or to Stansted, and build a digital bike rail, basically build a science park. Nobody drives across a science park, at least they shouldn't. That's the whole point. And Robert gets it. And I'm delighted that he and Grant Shapps have invited me to help put together a bold plan for a Cambridge-Norwich Development Corporation that would go and raise the money privately, build the new town, renovate the railway. I mean, we'll be waiting 30 years for Network Rail to do it. But you're right, Andy, the planning bit is key. And there is a lack of joined up thinking at the moment. And I'm not a minister in the government, I'm frustrated to say, but I think people are beginning to get that you can't do this in silos, you have to join it up. And on the 2.4%, you know, again, I think it's really key that we recognize there are some things that only government should do, and that deep science has got to be funded by us. But I'll be honest with you, I'm pretty worried that quite often, you know, governments tip money into quite deep science silos, often without industry involvement. The catapult centres were supposed to be, you know, on the Hermann Hauser model, they were supposed to be Fraunhofer institutes for deep private public interaction. One or two of them have got some private interaction. To me, they've become pretty elite public sector research institutes again with a tiny bit of industry engagement. That's a slight generalization, but you're dead right. And on ARIA, it's really important. I'd be saying to industry, if we put in 50%, where would you put in the next 50? And try and invest in those areas that industry needs us to lay the foundations for. But there's an awful lot of people in Whitehall with a begging bowl for their own particular bit of science. And that's a really bad way to allocate money. And part of my conversation at the moment with ministers is, if you really want to unlock the UK as an innovation and science superpower, we've got to look at how we do core science, commercialization, city and emerging markets, and create an incentive-based ecosystem. When I launched the Biomedical Catalyst back in 2011, it was very key. We said, look, we'll back industry. If you've got an idea, it's patented, protected, and you've got an investor partner, we'll do 50%. And we should be backing industry's leadership rather than pouring money into our own deep public sector silos, which industry then gets frustrated they can't get into. And it's a real problem.
George, that is just a perfect way to bring to a conclusion and actually to chime with throughout what we have heard throughout the day, a number of the points that you've picked up on and taken forward in a really, really helpful and exciting and inspiring way, actually. You're absolutely right. You've got to spread this innovation beyond, and if you do it through the Cambridge-Norwich development in one way, or we do it in the Innovation Corridor, or the ARC do it in one way, we have to have those connected and integrated, and we have to think of the country as a global scientific cluster. We are right behind that. That's been, as I say, the message, or a range of messages around today's conference, and it has chimed beautifully, or you have chimed beautifully with what it said. I mean, you'd almost think we'd had some design and planning into this, but anyway, the very fact that we've had so many participants stay is just terrific. Thank you, George. Thank you, panel. Thank you to everybody who has participated today. There you have it. We think the UK Innovation Corridor is important, but only if it connects spatially and talks to and promotes a green global scientific superpower that is the United Kingdom. So thank you all for attending, and please put the date of next year's conference in your diary. I have no idea actually when it will be, but it will be sometime in June, and we might even meet physically. But I hope you've learned a lot from today, made connections, and gone away with a real sense that we can do something, and if we don't do it now, when would we do it? So stay safe, and we'll see you all soon. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.